Norway, land of fjords, majestic mountains, cliffs and waterfalls. In addition to stunning geography, Norway is home to the greatest chess player who has ever lived, Magnus Carlsen. Since 2013, Norway has also hosted one of the strongest chess super tournaments in the world. And it is one for which Magnus has claimed the top prize in the last 4 years. Can anyone stop him? This time, he'll meet one of his toughest challengers ever at his home tournament, with 9 rivals all hungry to beat the best. From Carlsen's fiercest online rival today, in their first classical over-the-board battle in nearly 4 years, Hikaru Nakamura, to the young star Carlsen once handpicked as his most worthy championship opponent, Alireza Firouzja. 2 more young stars are trying to follow in his footsteps, Nodibek Abdusatorov and Gukesh Domaraju. 2 established stars have already won a super tournament in 2023, Anish Giri and Fabiano Caruana. 2 more long-time headliners seek to take their next turn atop a major tournament, Wesley So and Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. Finally, Carlsen's countryman and friend, Arian Tari, rounds out the field. Who will come out on top? Will Carlsen run the table yet again, or will someone else usurp the throne? This is Norway Chess.
Hello and welcome to the 11th edition of Norway Chess. And it is here in Stavanger where some of the world's biggest and brightest players, including Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura and Fabiano Caruana, just to name a few, are getting ready to play some lightning fast chess. Hold on to your seats, it's gonna be an adrenaline-packed show. I'm International Master Ivanka Hauska, and it is a great pleasure to be here calling all the action alongside the one and only Grandmaster Judith Polgar and, of course, commentator and Grandmaster extraordinaire David Howell. So, Judith, how excited are you to be here?
Oh, I'm very excited. I'm so happy to be back here. We are next door to the playing hall, and I think the players are also so happy. I just want to see fire today.
Fire on the board. And David, you've actually recently been commentating on the Chess Kid Cup, and now you're in Norway Chess commenting here. What's it like?
Well, it's been a busy week, Ivanka. It's a lot of chess, but I'm impressed by the players' stamina. Some players, like Chess Kid Cup winner Abdusatorov, are here now, ready to get going. And like you, Judith, I'm excited about the Blitz we're about to see.
Yeah, because wait till you look at this, because when we're talking about Norway Chess, we're talking about an impressive field. We have some of the world's best and brightest players. And just take a look at some of those names. Former world champion Magnus Carlsen, Wesley So, Firouzja, Hikaru Nakamura, Anish Giri, Fabiano Caruana, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, Nordibek Abdusatorov, just 18 years old, Arian Tari, and a man who celebrated his birthday, 17-year-old Gukesh. And David, I have to ask you, who are your favourites here?
Well, I'm excited to see all of these players. What a stacked field. But Magnus Carlsen, he's got to start as the guy to beat. He has made this his home territory. We're here in Norway. He's won the event so many times. Other than him, I'm going to single out Abdusatorov, winner of the Chess Kid Cup and a man on form.
Well, I'm really excited to see these youngsters, how they're going to be playing, and Gukesh, who is so young, Abdusatorov. But of course, the old-timers, some of them you can call like that, right? It's really exciting.
It's going to be exciting because we have some of the world's most dynamic players, just butting heads against the world's best teenagers. And, well, today it is the Blitz event, and it is a precursor to the classical event, and it's there to determine the classical event seeding, which means that the person who finishes first will actually get the first pickings, and it continues so on. It's a 10-player single round robin, and it's played at very fast, 3 minutes plus 2 seconds per move, 1 point per win and half a point for a draw. And now the first 5 seedings will get that extra white. Judith, how important is it to get that extra white?
When I was still in competitive chess, I have to say that I was very much looking forward to have extra white, especially for players who are very active and taking initiative. So extra white is really something that you're looking forward as a player.
And what do you think, David?
Yeah, it's the extra white, of course, is a bonus. But for me, it's about showing their form, showing their confidence. And these players, they will be wanting to win. They will be wanting to stamp their mark on the tournament, and that starts with the Blitz, of course.
And do you think it's an indicator? You know, if you do a good performance here, will it be a good sign for the classical event?
Yeah, the players who play well in the Blitz, their future opponents are going to fear them when the classical chess starts. And with this unique format in Norway Chess, drawn games in the classical decided by Armageddon, I think this is a great way for the players to get in the right zone.
And talking about a great way, well, we have something very special in store, because take a look at these first round matchups. I mean, we could not ask for a better start than this. And headlining is Anish Giri against Magnus Carlsen. Magnus Carlsen is such a Blitz specialist. Then we have Wesley So, Hikaru Nakamura, Alireza Firouzja, the world's strongest teenager, against Aryan Tari. Gukesh celebrating his birthday today against Fabiano Caruana. Shakhriyar Mamajorov against Nordibek Abdusatorov. And Judith, which match do you have your eye on?
Well, I'm consistent, so I want to see Gukesh against Fabi and Abdusatorov game with Mamajorov, because I think there are a lot of excitement going on later.
And you, David?
Yeah, the All-American matchup between Hikaru Nakamura and Wesley So is going to be fascinating. Two speed specialists facing each other, of course. But for me, the headline of this round, Anish Giri against Magnus Carlsen. A friendly rivalry, but a rivalry nonetheless.
Certainly. I mean, we do see that Magnus has been in great shape, especially when it comes to Blitz and tick-tock. That clock is ticking down, and there we see the players all lined up. They are getting ready. We see Anish with the white pieces, his jacket's off.
Absolutely, that's move number one.
And then he does the typical chess player thing of adjusting the pieces, getting ready to face Magnus Carlsen. And of course, the two did play each other in the recent Superbet tournament.
Yeah, just in Romania last week, Anish Giri faced off against Magnus Carlsen. Actually, Magnus Carlsen was dominant in that field, winning the Blitz portion, winning the whole event. So it's no surprise to see Magnus turning up late. That's customary for him by now. And we do also see Firouzja against Tari on our screen. A big clash between two good friends. Yeah, everywhere you look in this round, there's going to be action. There's going to be fire on the board.
It's very difficult to determine, which game is going to be more exciting, because these guys are just simply incredible. And we see Aryan there with the black pieces getting in the zone. And Fabiano as well facing off against 17-year-old Gukesh. Incidentally, it's his birthday. I've said it twice. I mean, how difficult is it to play on your birthday?
Well, to be honest, I was not very successful on my birthdays, but I think he's quite focused, as we can see right now. So he did not celebrate much his birthday, but he might be interested to celebrate with a victory today. Yeah. Not only in this game, but maybe the tournament itself.
Yeah, Gukesh, I actually just saw a graphic recently. He's the second highest rated 16-year-old of all time. But now he's 17. Can he go even further? I think that's the big question. Fabi, of course, in great form recently. In the Chess Kid Cup just last week, he got to the final where he fell to Abdusatorov. But either way, his blitz and rapid skills have improved enormously. Fabiano.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also saw some stats on the young Gukesh. His first player to cross 2,700. The youngest player, so not the first player to cross 2,700, the youngest player to cross 2,700, the youngest player to beat Magnus Carlsen. And, well, he has the white pieces against Fabiano. And Gukesh, incidentally, has been playing a lot of tournaments so far. And someone else who's playing a lot of tournaments, there we see Wesley So against Hikaru Nakamura. Now, these guys have played each other countless times. And very recently in the American Cup, it was Hikaru who was the victor when it came to their encounters.
Yeah, Hikaru tends to be dominant in this matchup. Just in recent times, he's also been taking down Wesley in Armageddon, usually over the Champions Chess Tour. So this one is going to be a decisive clash, I think, for the tournament standings later on. They'll both be up there for sure, and will want to start on a high. Wesley, meanwhile, looking off into the distance. I like the two kind of different postures they have here. Hikaru didn't have a great event last week on the Champions Chess Tour, where he was actually playing from Stavanger. So he will be hoping that he can right those wrongs and play a bit better this week.
Yeah, and incidentally, Wesley So has been a previous Blitz event winner. He's won it twice, including last year.
Well, we see that Anish is kind of focused, waiting the opponent, who is not other than the world number one. Is he still preparing, or what is he doing? Gary was like that. that he was always coming in the very last second.
Is that a psychological ploy, do you think, Judith, just arriving late to assert your dominance over the opponent?
Well, I think Gary was absolutely doing it for psychological reasons, but it also had to do with the fact that there were a lot of photographers and there was no zero tolerance at the time. So there was 5 minutes when people could make pictures. He showed up like 50 seconds before, and then all the flashes went into his eyes. But we see the game starts.
Yeah, and we're off. Magnus sits down, takes his jacket off, but Anish has been the first to move. No repeat this time of Magnus arriving 2.5 minutes late, like we saw during the World Championship, the Blitz World Championship. And, okay, 1e4. Anish gets away from the board this time. Wow, some mind games at this early stage, Judah.
Well, with 3 minutes on your clock, with 2 extra seconds, it seems like they have their ideas how to spend those extra seconds just looking around.
Wow.
But now it will speed up for sure.
Yeah. Fast and furious, but furiously away from the board. And it's the Sicilian defense. It's one of my favorite variations. It's the Alipin, the C3 Sicilian. And I've not actually seen Anish employ this one too much, but Magnus has a lot of experience on the black side, so it feels like deep preparation.
Well, it's interesting that nowadays, of course, players have different preparations for blitz games, for rapid, for classical, right? They have completely different ideas to try out. And now bishop to d3 went back.
Yeah. And how important is it to get that surprise value so that we see a pawn trade in the center?
Yeah, I think for Magnus, he prizes surprise value just as maybe the #1 priority, especially in Blitz chess. He'll play all sorts of openings just to confuse the opponent, just to gain a few extra seconds on the clock as they recover from a surprise. But I think these two players at the moment, they just have so much respect for each other that they're just playing their main repertoires. And okay, White has more space in this position, but Black looks super solid, Judith.
But I think it's also important for them to entertain themselves. And that's why also they like to play out some completely random things or ideas which they would not go in a classical game or not even in rapid games. But of course, Blitz is completely different because if they get an idea and they make the other one think for a minute, let's say, that's a huge advantage. So it's a huge psychological battle, I think, especially in these Blitz games. But it seems like Black wants to simplify the position, exchange the bishop, now the knight and the queen is trying to be exchanged. Of course, if once the black knight from b6 goes to d5 after exchanges, Black can have a beautiful position. But Anish is not going to exchange queens here, of course. He wants to go out to b5, I think.
Yeah, some threats on the board already. And wow.
Insisting on the exchange of queens. So Black has a great position, I believe.
Yeah, and it's right up Magnus Carlsen's alley. It's right up his style to just trade pieces. And in this endgame, there's enough imbalance with with White's far advanced e-pawn that there's something to chew on. If all the pieces come off, I think Black will have an advantage, actually, just because White has a bit more space and maybe not the pieces to control those squares.
Well, I think it will depend very much who is going to be coming first with both of the rooks to the open file. Whether the rook to c8 and the other one from the corner to from h8 to d8. Of course, we can see that now the bishop developed to e7. So Black's only problem could be how to get out the rook from h8. Because if Black has to castle, it's maybe not something that Magnus would be happy with, because then the king is very far away in the endgame. But still, somehow the h8 rook has to come to d8. Then Black would be better, because Black would have a great advantage in development. But king f1, very logical, right? Coming to the center, to e2, to defend that weak d square. And only later, Anish wants to develop with his bishop from c1. Maybe he's still hesitating to e3, to g5, possibly to exchange, or to f4, depending how Black is going to be continuing the game.
Yeah, moment of truth will be about to be seen. Do you think Magnus is going to castle Jovanka? Again, it's against his religion, really, to move the king away from the center in an endgame.
Absolutely not. I think he'll keep his king in the middle and try to initiate some trades. And, well, there's consequences of White's last move, and the knight does spring forward. And now we see a trade, bishop 4 knight. And Anish, I have to say, is playing very quickly. And to my eyes, it feels like Anish knows what he's doing. Could he be in prep?
I'm not so sure. He's down. He's only got about 1 minute and 10 seconds, 1 minute and 12 there, Anish Giri. And again, now there's another imbalance in the position. It's not just in terms of pawn structure, it's in terms of pieces, bishop for knight exchange.
Well, and now both pawns are hanging e5 and b2 at the same time, so white has to be somehow very fast on this. So knight e4 is kind of logical. Now black rook, should he go to b5, go back to c8, then rook c1 is possible, so pinning the knight on c4. That's what I would like to play with white, because suddenly you see that white's pieces are very active. Both rooks could not place anywhere better than that. And still black king is on e8, and finally castle came.
Yeah,
but now rook d7 just cannot be played because of knight e3, so that would be a blunder.
Yeah, you want to bring the rook up, of course, but then this rook would be undefended, so the black knight would jump out the way and discovered attack against this rook. Tactics, Judith.
It certainly is tactics, but it's still very much in the air. Yeah, you know, you can't play it now, but it's not easy for the black rook on f8 to actually challenge on d8.
Well, probably now it becomes tactical, or possibly b3 could be the move, and then black knight will be pushed back to b6. Which is not a very good placement for the knight, but if it ends up on d5 as we discussed it before, then it can be interesting for black. King e2, giving up the b2 pawn for the moment.
Wow, this has to be accurately calculated by Anish. Do you think Magnus is going to take the b2 pawn? Feels like at some point, maybe after a rook trade, the white rook could come up to d7. Suddenly everything getting traded off. Does Magnus want to keep control? He's calculating right now.
Well, I think it's a momentum in this game. Also, I would consider to play sometimes f5, trying to force white to decide where you want to go with the knight from e4, or you want to take the en passant on f6. And then also there is an open way for the black king to f7, and then to come to e6 later on. So it's an important moment, I think, this point, and only 17 seconds for Anish, and Magnus still has 40. So I think it's an important moment to decide right now, because after knight takes on b2, white is going to be exchanging the rooks and then puts the rook on the 7th rank, attacking the b7 pawn and the bishop on e7. So knight b6, I'm not surprised at all that he went back to cover that important square.
Yeah, covering d7, and Anish now maneuvering the white knights, just rotating.
h5, do you see that move?
Wow.
That surprised me.
And I know Magnus loves to push his rook's pawns, his h-pawns, but
and
this must be
finally the king is out, and we'll play king g6 and f5. What do you think about that?
I love it. Activate the king at any cost.
Yeah.
Deep stuff, I have to say. I was impressed by Anish's maneuvers, you know, putting the knight back to the edge of the board. And okay, well, we have a trade of rooks. And what about this ending? I mean, I was always taught that two of a kind, better than one of a kind. So what do you think, two knights?
Well, now the big question is, can black go king f5? But probably knight d6 seems to be very strong after that. Black is in trouble. So he played b6, f4. Now white wants to go g4 in the next move. f5 finally, look at that.
You predicted it, Judith, about 10, 15 moves ago. f5 has come, and okay, everything's getting hoovered off the board. Bishops normally tend to be better than knights when there's pawns on both sides of the board, but here it's just not enough material.
The simplification goes towards being a draw, but of course time is going down, and suddenly Magnus has less time for the first time in this game.
Yeah, the white knight will sit on a square that it can target black's f5 pawn. There we go, and it ties down the black king. I think this might be the problem. You just cannot break the status quo right now. But Magnus, he's hinting that he wants to go and capture the knight. King and pawn endgames, if the minor pieces disappear, will be treacherous for both sides. What do we think? Are we about to see a draw? Second time we've seen this position.
But Magnus actually said no. You know, he was given the opportunity to repeat the bishop maneuver, but instead that hasn't happened. And
but he has like 5 seconds left. Are you sure that you want to play for a win with black?
You've got to set the tone for the game. And, well, what do we think about this pawn advancing on the queen side? Because it does give some squares for the white king to jump to.
Well, we see that Magnus is in a real fighting spirit today. If he does not want to agree to draw here, he can get in trouble. Knight c4, blundering the pawn on a5. Look at that.
Wow, just no time on the clock for Magnus, under 5 seconds.
No time and no pawn. That's a little bit too much.
The good thing is black has great centralization here. The black bishop will be able to stop the white a-pawn from running. Black's king can start jumping in at some point, can start entering now. And okay, there we go. The black king is in. Suddenly it's a 3-result game. But white's a-pawn, can that one do the damage? Anish setting up some nasty knight forks. That white knight coming around to defend everything, but
Well,
wow.
white should be winning, but it's a big question whether 4 seconds on the clock, will he be able to queen the pawn over there? Knight c6 is coming, winning the bishop.
And surely the knight is going to sacrifice itself for the b-pawn, and the white king will steal all the glory and go for the remaining pawn on f5.
White has to bring back the knight.
Yep.
Where's he going to bring it, Anish Giri? He's got only a few seconds left. He's brought it back in line now with that black b-pawn, but can white force the exchange? The 2 remaining f-pawns will decide the game. Who gets there first later? Oh, black's king's coming back. This surely isn't a good sign for Magnus Carlsen, but... Or maybe he's got
He's
it.
saving it. What is saving? Well, it's a fair result, but with a roller coaster in between.
Yeah, we saw the evaluation bar. White was winning, but such a tricky endgame, and Magnus working his endgame magic to hold the draw. Let's zoom out now to the bird's eye view. We have all the results of the games. Wow, we didn't expect it to be this dramatic so early in the day.
That felt so quick, actually. It feels like we've only been there for 2 minutes, and somehow it is over for round 1. So let's take a look at the round 1 scores. In fact, it was a draw between Anish Giri and Magnus Carlsen, and it was also a draw between Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura. And meanwhile, Alireza Firouzja did defeat Ariantari, and Gukesh celebrating his birthday. Well, it didn't bring him any birthday luck in the first round because he lost to Fabiano Caruana, and Shakriat Mamajarov draw against Nordibek Abdusatorov. Well, what a start to the Norway Chess Blitz event.
Yeah, and maybe we can go and check out some of the games and some of the action in those Blitz games we weren't able to cover. And one of the games that caught my eye in the first round was that win by Alireza Firouzja against Ariantari. And we know that, of course, it's early days, it's 9 rounds, but yeah, those players who started with a win, they will be aiming to win the tournament now.
Well, and it's a very important part, right? To win the first game, it always gives you a good mood, good energy, and then you think, okay, the next one I also want to win. And then maybe you win all the games because things are going so fast in a Blitz tournament. But definitely this game, what we just looked at, it was quite nerve-wracking for the players, I believe. But probably the others were also quite something, seeing the final positions of the others.
Yes, certainly. And I have to say, do any of you still feel like first round nerves? Because often it's said that, you know, you start a tournament, you don't know how it's going to go. You're sitting there and it hits you. And you just need 2-3 games just to warm yourself up.
Oh, absolutely. You need a warm-up period. And this is great for the players, whatever happens. If you win the Blitz tournament, probably say, okay, I'm the best. If you go wrong and things go badly, oh, this was just a drawing of lots kind of story.
Yeah, and talking of some of the highlights from round 1, this is the finish of the game between Alireza Firouzja and Ariantari. We do see that a question mark on the last move by white, bringing up the rook to c7 from Firouzja. He was actually in trouble if Arian had brought his knight to the center of the board. Black is a pawn up and would have had great winning chances. But just to show the final few moves of this game, Black gave a check with his rook and things started to go wrong. Simply the white knight entered the position and suddenly Firouzja, working his magic, got a pass pawn and was able to promote. Look at this, just the last few moves, the pawn simply ran through, and with no time on the clock, Ariantari was not able to stop this pawn. The rook threatens to jump out the way with a check, with a promotion, and after knight takes f3, that did indeed happen. Rook check, the white queen appeared on the board, and that was the end of the game. Such a dramatic turnaround, and that's going to happen a lot in Blitz.
It's not enough to get a better position or a winning position. You have to win it. There's a huge difference between collecting the full point or just to have a winning position, especially if it's such a short time control what we had.
Yeah, certainly I agree with you. It's all about keeping control of your nerves and also the clock. I mean, they do say that when you're playing Blitz that the clock is your 17th piece. Hang on, have I got that right? 19th piece. I'm very bad with maths.
Yeah, 17th piece, I believe, there, Jovanka. And just to show one more quick highlight of the first round, we saw a big game between birthday boy Gukesh and Fabiano Caruana. And this, if we can pull it up, was the final position. We did see the White King just park itself on h2, and the players did agree to a draw because Black could simply repeat. The Queen hits the King, check, White steps back, and there's no way to escape the perpetual here. Queen to c1. White cannot drop back and block because this bishop would fall. So Gukesh, having had a great position earlier in the game, wasn't able to win this one, and a solid start for both players in the first round after a repetition of checks here.
Yeah, and well, the players don't actually have too much time to recover. They will get a few minutes and then back to the action. And what a start already. I just feel like it's opened with some fireworks already. And let's have a look at the standings, and there we can see Alireza Firouzja 1 point, and also Magnus Carlsen has got 1 point, and Fabiano Caruana has 1 point, and Magnus Carlsen ½ point, Hikaru Nakamura also ½ point. So everything to play for.
Yep, everything to play for. And okay, this, remember, is the Blitz event, and I think we'll just correct those some of those results in a moment, but this is just the Blitz event. The players are playing for seeding, but do you think we saw that kind of reflected in the last game? Magnus taking huge risks in an equal endgame just to try and win against his rival, when actually, objectively, it was a draw.
Well, we can say that he thinks that he can do anything he wants, right? This was the first impression that, okay, it's a Blitz tournament, I try everything, I want to win even the completely dead drawish endgame, right? And when it was like b4 he played, I had this feeling that, oh, what a c4 square for the knight, right? And, well, of course, he's able to pull out his magical hand after having blundered or something like that, and this is what happened right here. Right now.
But isn't it a way of asserting dominance when you manage to save what is objectively a lost position?
Well, it can fire Black very easily.
Exactly, right. But I mean, even if you get a lost position and you say to your opponent, hey, I'm still good enough to draw it, or you're not good enough to win it.
To be honest, actually, I was very surprised that Anish could not convert it. Because if it would be not Magnus sitting opposite, but let's say a 2500 player, like who is much lower in rating, then it wouldn't be a problem. But somehow Magnus is sitting there and a piece up is not enough, right?
Yeah, if he was sitting opposite me, Anish Giri, he would have crushed me 100 times out of 100 from that piece up endgame. But yeah, like you said.
But also Magnus kind of makes his moves like, I still have a chance, I'm fighting for it, right?
Body language.
And also, of course, it's more than that. It's not only luck, but he knows the potential opportunities. And of course, bringing his king back, this was the only opportunity somehow to catch on the knight and the pawn and get back.
And talking about round one, that's been and gone, we now do have to look ahead to the round two matchups. And we are going to see a lot of exciting games in store. And we see Magnus Carlsen facing off against 17-year-old Gukesh, Hikaru Nakamura against Abdusattorov, Fabiano Caruana, Mamadjarov, Arian Tari with the white pieces against Anish Giri, and now it's Wesley So's turn to face off against Alireza Firouzja. And Judith, which match excites you the most?
I'm very curious how both players will continue, Anish and Magnus, and of course Magnus against Gukesh. I'm very excited on that game because let's see how they recover and they go on with the next round.
And David, which one do you want to keep your eyes on?
Yeah, we're spoiled for choice. That's the problem, yeah. All these matchups. I'm going to say Hikaru Nakamura against Nodibek Abdusattorov. I think Hikaru, if he does get on a roll, he is the type of kind of streaky form player, especially in Blitz. He can just crush the field, but he needs to get motoring, and if he wins this next round, Hikaru, I think he might be one of the favourites. And there we do see the players sitting down at the board. Abdusattorov, a man in form, winner of the Chess Kid Cup, former world rapid champion. Can he translate that to Blitz? And I think we will be starting with this one. Hikaru looks focused, Judith.
Well, it's going to be a very exciting game, I believe, because Nakamura is a great Blitz player, right? And of course, the youngsters are always playing great, I believe. I played a lot of Blitz myself. I was a huge Blitz player. But I think this new generation is really playing online. They are used to the fact that it's not only the classical event, there are a lot of rapid events, a lot of playoffs, a lot of Armageddon. So with all these time controls, they have to be ready. At the same time, they have their very sharp mind, and they can stand the stressful moments very well. But I'm not afraid that Nakamura will give his skin so easily.
Yeah, you talk about the young generation being very experienced online. There's nobody more experienced online than Hikaru Nakamura, and we are off. It's an early start here. Queen's pawn opening. And wow, the bishop coming out to g5 early in the game. Hikaru Nakamura really trying to land that surprise effect with this opening.
And well, Abdusattorov, he's got his openings worked out, so he actually jumps forward with his knight and now challenges the pawn in the middle of the board. And we also have to remember, when it comes to Hikaru, he's not just also full-time streamer. He is actually #2 Blitz player in the world. And #1 Blitz player in the world is actually, well, in terms of ratings, is not actually Magnus Carlsen. It's Alireza Firouzja, with a rating of 2904, I think, in the live ratings.
But I think he's someone who plays a lot of bullets as well online. And
Yeah.
those things I never played, for example. So they are so speedy players.
Yeah, speedy players, and the first time we've seen the players pause is after Black's bishop has just landed on g4. Bit of an annoying pin here for Nakamura to deal with. He's just taking a moment or two. Normally in this type of pawn structure, you just want to cement a pawn on c3. You just want to build a strong pawn center. It looks like a London system. It has actually transposed to almost a London system here. But yeah, Nakamura deciding whether to take a solid path or whether to go maybe a bit more aggressive. I'm not sure what the options would be here. Maybe you just kick away the black bishop with a pawn to h3. Really long think for Hikaru.
Exactly. This is what I wanted to point out, that when you have 3 minutes, you're not spending 40 seconds on a move, right?
Yeah, is that lack of confidence, maybe?
I think maybe he was just kind of surprised that actually he has to make a decision, because the d4 pawn can be vulnerable because of the pin. But now it will be a question whether, what do you think? It's going to be long castle or short castle in this game?
Oh,
my.
big call.
Sure, he answers it for you. But then you have to kind of ask this question, like, what is White's advantage? Because to me, okay, well, I wasn't expecting the bishop to trade itself for the knight, but the structure is very stable. Black doesn't have a problem in development. To me, it looks like Black is good position.
Very stable position, and it's also a big question always, how can you play an opening in Blitz which is easier to play? Because that's very important, that you can just flesh out the moves, and it's just a very natural plan. Of course, c4 is very logical. This is the only way Black can be challenged, I believe. I wonder after d takes c4 whether d5 and somehow White wants to put pressure on the king on e8, so not allowing to castle. That's the only thing what Nakamura can have in mind. And in Blitz, it's a very strong move, I believe.
Yeah, it's really instructive. White's bishop pair was about to be eliminated, but it's all about speed. And like you say, the black king was about to come under fire in the center. So not a bet castles, I think a good practical decision for Black, but he's on the back foot.
He did not dare to take on c4 because he was afraid that it will open up very much for the king. So he went for a very solid symmetrical game, right? White is going to be a little bit pushing, maybe rook to c1, rook to e1, controlling the files, but ignore the exchange of bishops.
Yeah, Hikaru, I think like a lot of top grandmasters these days, they are biased towards the bishop pair. And I love this decision. He's just putting pressure on d5. He's saying, okay, long term, Black under some pressure.
At the same time, I can't say that the e3 bishop is doing so much. It became kind of passive after this move, and the d6 bishop is very active. It's excellently placed, right? But the question is how Black is going to be regrouping his pieces. Queen d7, or is he going to play knight e7 to defend the d5 pawn, or he's just bringing his rooks to the open file right now?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting question as well, how White can maximize that light squared bishop. I mean, is Hikaru just looking at doing things, small things like pushing a pawn in front of the king just to maximize the space there, or is he going to try to actually control some of the dark squares like c5 and e5?
I liked a lot this last move by Nakamura, because he's controlling the f5 square, which I think can be very important for the black queen if maybe even in the previous move, queen f5 was a better move to control those white squares. Because for the moment, it's the white squares I like very much for white. Even queen b5 can be something to think of for white, to put pressure on b7 and the d5 pawn. And also g3, what you mentioned. I like also very much g3, king g2. So it also a3 to stop the knight b4 option, then improve the rook's position from f1, maybe doubling on the c file, but it's maneuvering.
The next part of the game, it definitely feels like the players are jockeying for position, but it's black who's kind of lacking a productive plan. Just to point out as well, bishop takes pawn was maybe threatened on that last move. It wasn't earlier because the black bishop could have taken on h2, getting out the way, and the bishop on d5 would have been attacked for white. So therefore, Abdusattorov drops back and nicely defended this pawn, but very passive move.
Yeah, now black is trying to get the bishop to g7 and put pressure on the d4 pawn, I believe. I like very much h4, h5. Later on, king g2, rook h1 will appear on the h file, I think, just in case to put a little pressure there.
Yeah. Well, now Hikaru actually had to answer a question of where to put the queen, and I must admit I did not anticipate this queen move. I thought the queen would slide 2 squares to b3.
It can be very far away, to be honest, because now queen on h3, white didn't have time to play king g2, which is an important part, I think. Rook c3 against capturing rook e3 was something, a threat by black, and I'm not sure white is so happy right now.
Okay.
In maneuver, bishop g4. Bishop g4 trapping the queen.
Of course, Abdusattorov, he was not the World Rapid 2021 champion for nothing. He spots that and retreats the queen. And, well, you kind of highlighted this move many moves ago. The king will step up. And now the white rook is going to slide over to the h-line. And it's such an instructive game, I feel, from Hikaru's side.
It's interesting that rook c5. I'm not sure it's necessarily the best move, but it's kind of an unpleasant move, right? And maybe he's also testing the opponent. Do you want to go back bishop f8 and making a repetition of moves? Are you playing for a draw? Just a little testing the opponent. And but at the same time, the d4 pawn is not vulnerable. What do you think?
Yeah, it
seems so.
Looks like there are going to be some tactics. White can capture the black pawn in the center, and it might come at the cost of his own d4 pawn. But first, Hikaru trades. Will the two bishops be decisive? I think that's the big question. That's going to be the only imbalance once black grabs on d4. This pawn also hanging. Do you get greedy and take it? It feels like black's very active, but Hikaru, he knows how to quell any activity. And wow, okay, big threat. Don't forget about your rook on e8. Just a typical blitz move there. You're just creating some small threats and maybe going after this a7 pawn as well.
I believe rook d8 is something to play, but black wanted to defend the b7. I'm not sure it was the best opportunity. Now the bishops are very powerful.
And the a-pawn has fallen off the board. And for me, who likes to grab pawns, that is very good news indeed.
But there is some problem maybe for black. He cannot go to the h-file because of the rook.
Another pawn has fallen off the board. And Hikaru just giving checks. And take a look at Nordebek's clock time. Just 1 second. Oof. He made that move with 2 seconds to spare.
Yeah, only 2 second increment. It's not a lot of time for the players, and I think that's short sequence where Abdusattorov was down to 5 seconds. It's going to decide the game. 2 pawns up now. Okay, down to 1 pawn. One of them has dropped, but that white a pawn is going to be decisive.
Oh, bishop d6. Some tactical issues over there.
Yeah, there's still some checks though, and also, okay, he centralizes the rook. Oh, but Nordebek, he is showing what a fighter he is. He's managed to trade off queens. And still 1 pawn deficit. What do you think?
But that little pawn on the a file, it can go only 1 by 1, but eventually it will reach possibly the destination it's aiming for.
Yeah, that white a pawn will cost black his bishop here, and
what amazing! What did he do, right? I mean, queen a4. I think queen a4 was the move for the confusion.
And we see a result. And Nordebek has resigned, and Hikaru walks away with the point. What a game from Hikaru. I thought it was very instructive.
Yeah, just typical Hikaru. He didn't do anything too flashy, no big tactics, just
experience.
Yeah, experience.
Experience.
Accumulating the small advantages and converting them eventually.
And putting pressure on the opponent and asking question. What do you do here? How do you regroup your pieces? Where do you maneuver your bishop? Where do you put your knight? But we have a lot of other interesting games running.
And let's go to the Magnus game against birthday boy Gukesh. It's a very tense endgame. Magnus, he seems to thrive in these types of positions, but okay, everything still to play for. It's really imbalanced, lots of pass pawns all over the place. Who's better here and why? The evaluation bar says equal, but it looks anything but drawn to me.
Oh, there is a b2 pawn. Wow, that is something to be annoying. But right now, white is collecting some of the most important pawns.
Yeah,
Black is grabbing some pawns too, some counterplay potentially on the king
well,
side.
Knight h4, knight f3.
exactly.
Knight e1, knight f3, absolutely.
Has a target, but I mean, let's not forget that two players playing that game, and white's central pawns are just racing up the board.
It's a race.
Race.
Wow.
We're off to the races, as they say. And meanwhile, we also see a result. Caruana did lose to Mamedyarov.
Yeah, big results here in the standings. We'll go and recap the results a bit later on. But this race, it feels like white has to start running the king towards the black knight and pawns.
Well, the h2 pawn will be grabbed.
Yeah, and in practical terms, it feels easier to play black. It's just one-track mind, just push the pawns, go for glory. And, whoa, looks like a blunder from Magnus Carlsen. Is black going to win?
F1.
This
h2
pawn is
over.
promoting.
Oops. Oops. Well, it's a nice birthday present. But Magnus will not give up. Well, I guess I
think
did
he will.
take
Wow.
the knight.
I think a transmission error here. He did take that black knight. The game goes on. We can see in the video they're playing moves here. Very, very fast. But queen against knight and two pawns should be easy to convert, Judith.
Well, I'm not sure it's so easy when obviously Magnus has his incredible skills of defense and knight on f3 standing great, protecting the pawn on e5. So the question is whether the black king is able to come out to c6 and d5 and somehow push back a little bit the knight and the king at the same time. So I think really king c6 should be the move eventually.
Yeah, only a few seconds for Gukesh though. Can the birthday
2
boy
seconds
hold
on
his
the clock.
nerves?
Oh,
And of course there's always a problem with blunders. There's always an opportunity to blunder. And look how active the pieces are. And right. Oh!
Feel the nerves. The pawns are pushing.
Oh!
Is Magnus going to turn this one around?
How much around?
Pawns have been stopped.
And Magnus with just 14
But there is
seconds.
such an easy to blunder some knight c6 check eventually. Ooh,
Wow, and
what a blunder.
yeah, Magnus
Magnus
laughs.
is laughing.
Well, what can you do though when you make a mistake like that?
But
Smile.
I'm not sure it was winning at the end. I think if he doesn't blunder, pushes his pawn, I think with the king defending the knight defending the pawn defending the other pawn, the black king is stuck there, and maybe it's a positional draw.
Yeah, it feels like Magnus had fought back, but in the end, blundering one of his pawns away, resigning against Gukesh. Yeah, anything can happen in the Blitz, and we should mention Magnus Carlsen hasn't won the Blitz section of Norway Chess since 2017.
I see that all the games were decisive.
And let's take a recap of round 2. We saw Magnus Carlsen just losing there to 17-year-old Gukesh. Hikaru Nakamura played a smooth game against Abdusattorov. Fabiano Caruana did lose to Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And Aryan Tari, well, his woes continued as he lost to Anish Giri and Wesley So, picking up a victory against world number 1 rated in Blitz, Alireza Firouzja. Well, what a decisive round.
Wow.
It's to be expected when you're playing Blitz. It's
But
fast, it's furious.
But you can see that Magnus is somehow rusty, I think. In this first 2 games, you could see that he couldn't sense it, feel it exactly, what are the borders.
Yeah, somehow you sense that he was pushing his luck.
Yeah.
And he took it too far. But, they do say that Magnus is very slow starter. Well, not very slow, but a slow starter in general. Warms up and then just gets motoring. And
Yeah, one player who isn't a slow starter is Wesley So, and this is how he won his game against Alireza Firouzja in round 2 of the Blitz tournament. To me, it looks almost equal, this position. Level pawns, level pieces, but Wesley has the advantage because his knight is actually extremely active here. There's a big target on the a5 square. The white king is marching into the center. And just to show the great endgame technique with which Wesley converted this advantage, after black played e5, he simply stepped forward.
I don't
pawn
like
to
e5, sorry.
Yeah, pawn on a dart square.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And after knight to f6, simply a pawn dropped. Bishop takes a5, and just as we saw in the Magnus Carlsen game, knights are incredibly bad at stopping rook's pawns. This white a pawn was ready to race forward. Black could not go for the bishop trade, therefore, and a couple moves later, bishop to e5, knight d8, and it was just one more move, I think, and the game was decided a few turns later. White simply plan one.
We should remember that bishop on b6 is just so supportive of the a pawn. It's just protecting. The a5 square is important. a7 is so important. And yeah, the black pawn on c5 and the weakness on e4, well, that was a quite unfortunate finish for Firouzja.
Yeah. It's extraordinary. We had the same pattern in 2 games. We had it in Hikaru Nakamura against Norway, and now we saw it here, just to demonstrate its venomous capabilities. And whew, once these games kick off, it just feels like it's all non-stop.
And I see that there were some funny endings on queen and pawn, queen against rook, so they really play it out all the way. And of course, when you have only seconds left, it's so difficult to recall any theoretical drawing moves or winning. So it really matters a lot in what state of mind you are playing today in just these 2-3 hours of the Blitz tournament, which is running. So exciting endgames.
Yeah, and talking of exciting endgames, I want to show you both just one fascinating finish. And in Blitz, anything can happen, but this one had a few twists and turns. It's a rook endgame. White currently a pawn down, but he equalized the material by calculating a long variation. He grabbed this pawn, heading into a king and pawn endgame, deflecting the black king from its rook, and suddenly the race began. The king g4. White started running towards the black pawns, and as we saw in this race, actually, it feels like this one should be a draw if White was accurate, but pawn to b5, a big blunder. He should have actually pushed the a pawn, and queens. As soon as black queens the pawn, White's a pawn would be far enough down the board to hold the draw. Instead, Fabiano, a bit of a slip here, pushing the wrong pawn. And as we saw, black was first to make a queen, and b pawns are not good against queens in this endgame.
Even though if you have 2 of them.
Yeah, even if you have 2 of them, exactly, Judith. It took a few moves, but black was able to round up the pawns.
It seems like it's not a Blitz tournament only, but it's a race tournament as well of pawns.
Well, it's a nice thing to see, and we do need to look at the Blitz standings after 2 rounds. And well, we're going to see at the top of the table, it is Hikaru Nakamura with 1.5 points out of 2, and running alongside him are Anish Giri and Wesley So and Shakhriyar Mamajorov. And we have some people on 50%, Alireza, Fabiano, Gukesh, and Magnus on 0.5 point out of 2. And David, are you surprised by these standings so far? I mean, it's early days.
It's early days. I'm most surprised, I've got to admit, by Magnus. Because, yes, he often is a slow starter, but just last week he won an extremely strong over-the-board Blitz tournament. That being said, he's only 1 point behind the lead, and with 7 Blitz games still to go, anything can happen. I've got to say, extremely impressed so far by Anish Giri and, of course, Hikaru Nakamura. Just experience shining through.
Yes, certainly experience shining through, and it's going to be such an exciting event. And of course, you have to remind ourselves that this Blitz event stands as a precursor to the classical event, and whoever finishes first will get to pick their seedings, and the top 5 seedings will have that extra white with the classical games. And how important is that extra white?
I think the players are not thinking about that at all, but of course they are going to be much more happy to have the extra white just in case.
And let's remind ourselves of the round 3 matchups. And there again, we have more thrilling pairings. We have Shakhriyar Mamajorov now facing off against Magnus Carlsen. Shakhriyar, one of the most creative grandmasters around. Alireza Firouzja playing against Hikaru Nakamura. Now, these two are big rivals on the Blitz rating list. And then we have Anish Giri against Wesley So, Gukesh against Aryan, and Norway against Fabiano Caruana. And I have to ask you, Judith, which pairing are you most excited about?
Oh, now it's Alireza Nakamura, absolutely. I really want to see what's going to happen over there, because it was some magic what Hikaru just did in the previous game. He really showed his class and his experience, and he just one move or two moves and he turned everything around. But it was already something for a second for Abdusattorov that, okay, finally it's draw, let's exchange everything. And then that second, he fell apart.
Yeah, certainly. And David, are you equally excited by this encounter?
Yes, for sure. We saw the handshake there. Hikaru means business. Often it is about how you start in a tournament, and as I mentioned earlier, Hikaru, he's the type of player who can get on a roll, but Firouzja, of course, will be aiming to attack. The white pieces for him, I think, are actually essential, not just in the Blitz tournament, but the classical. He's so strong with white every time I see Firouzja play. So Hikaru here, I think he'll be happy to just get out of the opening with a solid position. Actually looking very relaxed, Hikaru.
I think he loves to play Blitz. And of course he loves to win, which he did just in the previous round. But you don't see him nervous. Did you ever see him really nervous? I mean, look at he's focused, concentrated, and he wants to win.
Yeah.
And the handshake and the players are off, and Firouzja opening with the king's pawn. And will Hikaru employ his trademark Berlin? Oh, yeah, I'm very happy.
Not the boring one.
I'm very happy to see there's no 13 move repetition there.
Yeah, Firouzja going against or maybe what some people were fearing at home. I know here in the studio we thought, oh, Berlin, not a good sign for a fighting game. But this one is very tense. Most pieces still on the board. Only a trade of one set of pawns so far. And if I recall correctly, Firouzja has been employing this opening or this specific variation against the Berlin a lot in recent times. So has Hikaru done his homework? Looks very symmetrical, Judith.
It is very symmetrical, and the bishop on c5 is extremely powerful. Now, knight b8 is something, a nice regrouping of the knight. Eventually, it wants to go to d7 after c6 or without c6. Rook goes from f8 to e8 or d8, knight f8, knight g6 or e6 possibly. But also it was important for black, I guess, to go away from the bishop from b5 to be exchanged. And it's very typical what white is going to knight f1, also trying to get to g3, possibly to f5. It's important for black that he played a5, so b4, gaining space is not possible from white side. Now I would think bishop g4. I would like to play it with black.
What is white pinning their hopes on for? Because to my mind, and I'm not so experienced with these type of positions, it just looks equal. I mean, okay, once black has completed their development, and there we can see the knight is actually targeting the f2 pawn, and well, Hikaru is just initiating a set of trades.
Hikaru is so good in these types of positions, I've got to say. Even when it looks like there's nothing going on, he's so good at just sensing the tempo. I was fearful for black. I thought symmetrical, but white is 2 or 3 moves ahead. Suddenly, black starts the attack, attacking this f2 pawn. He gets time to develop his bishop. There's going to be a bishop trade, and no problems at all that I foresee for black here.
Well, anything can happen in these positions, I believe. White is going to be exchanging on e6, then he goes h3, then he comes with the knight to e3, I believe, or well, without h3. But f5 square, don't underestimate it from white side. I like to have my knight on f5 in these kind of structures. Eventually he's going to play b3, bishop b2, or bishop d2 and b4, bringing the other rook. It's a slow maneuvering part. Of course, in these positions, the d3 square can be vulnerable and weakness for white. So it will be interesting how black will develop the knight from b8 through d7 to whether he's going to be moving away the bishop and to locate the knight on c5. But the knight is on f5 and the h6 pawn can be captured, sacrificed by the bishop sometimes.
And there we can see Hikaru actually preempting any sacrifices on h6 by dropping the bishop back. Perhaps the knight that doesn't have a good home on b8 will find its way on c5.
Well, definitely knight b d7 will be the next move, I believe, because bishop b6 can be
it's a bit annoying,
unpleasant.
Right?
Yeah, he's pausing here, Hikaru, like you say, just develop the piece. Maybe he's also thinking about whether to, at some point, move the king across and just evict this knight from the square. Judith, Jovanka and I, we started this rhyme. A knight on f5 will thrive, and here, the knight on f5, the most important piece. If you kick it back, I think black is okay.
Well, Well, of course, King H7 and G6 is a very sensible idea to kick out the F5 knight, but sometimes people are not worried that much about the F5 knight. It's more for the eye than it's in reality. Some really big harm can be done. The question is whether can White go G4 and G5, for example. It's especially blitz game kind of moves that you can go on the nerves of your opponent and show that you have some great ideas. And stabilize the knight on F5, and it's not really opening too much the king side for the white. So I'm a big G4 fan, so I would definitely probably try out at some point.
You predicted it, Judith.
G4.
It's on the board. Big attack incoming for White. Risky because White's king is open. You lose control over some key squares later on, but we love to see it. I was about to say as well, it's Alireza's style to attack. I think when he goes for slower maneuvering games, he's less strong. So yes, he's had to drop back with his knight on F5, but the pawn is going to step forward even further. Lines are about to become open around the black king.
Well, I'm worried a little bit for White with if Black can go reach to D3 with the knight and even double bishop rook D7, rook D8. Also, queen exchange offer is something very unpleasant for White. So let's see. But can't White take a pawn with bishop C5 exchange and then take on E5?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, tactics are about to happen. I think he might go for that, Judith. The evaluation bar doesn't react, so we see it's still probably fine for Black, but Hikaru must have had to do some calculation when going for this variation. If you don't take this knight first, if you first capture on E5, then later after a queen trade, the white E4 pawn will drop. So yeah, it looks like if you want to win this game, this is what you have to go for.
Well, I think Black is going to capture back somehow, gaining the E4 pawn, so it's going to be open file, D file, and E file. Knight E5 is another way. He wanted to keep his bishop, which is also understandable. He wants to have his bishop on B6 or potentially, eventually. It's roughly an equal position, I believe. And G4 is not doing any harm to White in an endgame at all.
Yeah, actually, it's quite nice to have this square for your king. It's quite nice to kind of clamp down on Black's pawns on dark squares. Watch out for any endgame favouring White if it just comes down to bishops, because White's bishop more active than its counterpart. So still very level, and the players have agreed a draw.
As easy as that.
Wow.
I mean, we were discussing all the subtleties, and the players like, yeah, let's call it a day. Let's move on to the next round. And whoa, it was quite a tense struggle, I would say. And do you think both of these players would have looked at their opponents and gone, I'm going to target you and I'm going to give a draw against you. I'm not that fast.
I think it depends very much on the tournament situation, but at the same time, of course, the players don't want to give out all their energy today, because tomorrow the real stuff starts, right? Today is the fun part of the tournament, really, that they can try out everything, anything they want, because they want to focus, obviously, for tomorrow. But of course, they don't want to give points just like that. But look at that, Magnus is in trouble.
Again, Magnus Carlsen, he lost round 2. He's about to fall to defeat in round 3 if, and it's a big if, Shakhtar Mamedyarov can hold his nerve. White here is a pawn up. Looks like a very dangerous pass pawn as well. And if White can somehow bring his knight into the game, I'm not sure which kind of route you take into the position. The black king looks weaker than its rival. There we go. The white knight is in. Black needs counterplay. Black needs to get his pieces towards the white king. I don't see it right now. And Magnus on the run with his king, but simply step forward with your pawn.
But what about G6, knight D5 against Shak? You are not getting away with this.
Yeah, Shak is so good with White. He's so good when he's got the initiative, and here no risk either. And White's about to make a new queen after a queen check. Push G7, G8, it's coming through.
And it's a beautiful move by Shak, because that queen on H8 controls a lot of the dark squares around the white king. And yep, we have seen a result. Magnus does indeed resign, and Shak moves to 2.5 points out of 3. What a start by the world champion. Well, not world champion, former world champion.
Yeah, it feels like he's just taking too many risks at these early stages. Magnus, of course, hates to draw. He wants to win every game, but that can backfire when you're playing against such strong opponents. Yeah, well done to Shak, though. Nice victory from him.
But he's a fantastic blitz player, and a great blitz player himself. And of course, well, for Magnus, it was a very shaky start, and it seems like he did not find his form yet.
Not yet. He needs to work his way, but one game still remaining, and that is between Nordebek and Fabiano.
Yeah, Nordebek here in huge trouble. Look at the White King. That White King is going to have some serious issues in the near future. First, a knight trade. Is Fabiano maybe messing it up though? Wow, without the knights, he can't deliver checkmate, and the black G-pawn has dropped. I thought that pawn was going to decide the game. Suddenly, the tables have turned, and white is a pawn up in this endgame.
Wow.
Still open kings though. With queens on the board, anything can happen, Judith.
Oh, absolutely. Just seeing these few seconds, what was going on in the last few moves. And I would still bet on a draw, looking these kind of moves, that it's going to be some rook endgame at the end, and the a-pawn will be pushed. Actually, now, I don't know which king is more vulnerable, the white or the black. Now white can blunder something, but rook a1 and queen... Well, it's getting shaky for white.
Yes, certainly, and that's why Nordebek actually moves his queen to the aid of the white king. It feels like there's a lot of checks, and they're just making those moves just to build up that time, because they do get an extra 2 seconds on the clock per move. And Nordebek now doing great things, you know, centralizing the queen, white king, pretty safe, and queen is targeting the c5 pawn. What's happened?
I think somebody lost on time.
Wow, we have a result. Where
Fabi.
are the kings? Looks like Fabi's clock ran out.
Yeah.
Difficult position. He was facing a difficult defense there, but Abdusattorov, takes the win. In a rematch, I should mention, of the final of the Chess.com Cup, Abdusattorov triumphs again over Fabi.
Well, this was a very painful loss. What we've seen, he had completely winning position. Pawn on g2 front of the white king. Knight on e5. The doubling the rook, the queen, everything. And in 2 moves, the g2 pawn just is gone. So this will be something to get hard to get overcome on that for Fabi, I think.
Yeah, it is a little bit tough. And here we can look at the round 3 scores. It was a great round for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov as he took down Magnus Carlsen, draw between Alireza Firouzja and Hikaru Nakamura. Anish Giri also played a draw against Wesley So, and Gukesh lost against Ariane Atari. Much needed point for Ariane there. And Nordebek beating Fabiano Caruana once more. Wow. What a start. 3 rounds in, and we've seen surprises, we've seen tense moments, and we just saw some Fabi lose on time. And, well, I think we have a lot of things.
Oh, it's amazing. Some really, really, really interesting stuff going on. Maybe Nakamura, we can say he's incredibly stable. The game itself, very stable, logical, no big blunders or anything like that.
Yeah, as you say, he's just doing his thing, Hikaru Nakamura, but we do have a different leader at the moment after 3 games. If we look at the Blitz standings, it's actually the winner against Magnus Carlsen. It's the guy who took down the king, Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, storming out to the lead in after 3 rounds, 2.5 points, and he is followed by 3 players, Hikaru Nakamura, Anish Giri and Wesley So. Yeah, you've got to say some players have been more stable than others at this early stage, and I think that's reflected in the standings.
It's certainly early days, though. We're still plenty of rounds left, so anything can happen. But I agree with David, a promising start for Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. And what do you think, Judith?
Well, seeing the cross table, it's quite scary. Magnus is number 10. Yeah. This is not something I'm used to, or anybody, I think. I think we are going to see some great fights in the next round. Absolutely. I'm expecting some magic, and also by Magnus.
Yeah, and talking about great fights, we've seen a lot of great fights in round 3. But before we head into a break for round 4, we have to say, don't miss your chance to win a Diamond membership this Friday. The Chess.com Discord server is hosting an arena with 4 Diamond memberships up for grabs. To stake your claim, join the Discord at go.chess.com/Discord. Then connect your account to Chess.com and you're done. You can now compete in the weekly arena for our Discord community and win free Diamond membership. Use !Discord in chat now. Ooh, and talking about diamond play, and we do have to say that we've seen a lot of tense moments, a lot of struggles, and we are gonna catch our breaths as we go into a break for round 4. So join us on the other side.
my goodness, knight d8? Whoa.
Bishop g5 with mate.
way.
It has to give it. Mate! You wanted mate!
Chance, rook f7. Whoa, no! No! No!
Hello, and we are back in action as the chess excitement continues in Stavanger. And we are going to dive straight into the round 4 matchups. And once again, and I keep saying this, we are in for a treat because we have the world's best players competing here in Norway Chess. We have Magnus Carlsen against Nordibek Abdusatorov. Magnus starting off with half a point out of 3. Hikaru Nakamura against Fabiano Caruana. Ariane Tari against Shakriya Mamedov. Wesley So against Gukesh. Alireza against Anish Giri. And Judith, which which matchup really excites you?
Well, I don't know, kind of all of them, but I'm very curious about Hikaru and Fabi game, but also what Magnus has to do with the youngster.
Yeah. And there we can see the two players lined up. In fact, they're making their moves. David, what do we have in store for us?
Yep. We have started in this clash between Nakamura and Caruana. It looks like Nakamura is deploying the same opening we saw him use earlier in the day when he took down Abdusatorov. But can Caruana do any better? Recovering, of course, from the game just before the break, where he ended up losing on time. Always a blow to the confidence, and early days, it looks almost symmetrical. Still very quiet position. It looks like that's the strategy Nakamura has chosen at this early stage.
Yeah, it's very interesting that he decided to go extremely solid, right? That he wants to put the pieces very quickly. He has his strategy, and then somehow in the middle game, he will shuffle things the way that confuse the opponent and maybe goes wrong, gaining time. And the c4, of course, is the move to open up the position and try to play for more than just a very equalish position, right? But black has all the thing to equalize. There is no problem with the bishop. It's an f5, it's out, so the bishop, the pawn on e6 is not blocking it. So it is clearly who has better nerves, who is more focused, concentrated, will win this game.
Yeah, I've got to admit, if it was me playing this position with white, I think all of the top players would criticize me for playing for a draw. But Hikaru is getting away with it, and if he can squeeze water out of this stone, it looks totally level to me, then yeah, fair play to him.
I have to say, I actually really like what Hikaru's done. I know it's just very subtle, but I feel that that niggle that he will get with a knight perhaps coming to a4 and c5 is going to be enough just to put Fabiano under pressure. And there we see Hikaru simply lining his forces up on the C line.
I think it's also kind of a provocation that I don't want too much. I'm just making moves. I don't want really advantage. Show me. Do you want to beat me? Punch me, you know? and I mean, look at the position. It's practically nothing for white. I mean, black can go bishop h5, or he can also try to go knight a5, knight c4. I mean, there's so many plans for black as well, right? That you have to choose. You have to spend a little few seconds here, few seconds there. Well, if he doesn't have any advantage with white, I might as well play for a win, right? But if you try to play for a win with black, it's not so easy to get really something. But I like bishop h5 and queen f6 and somehow pin the queen. I think it's kind of unpleasant for white.
Yeah, unpleasant. And actually, in terms of clock times, Hikaru is down by 30 seconds. He's hinting that he might push the pawn to g4 to kick away black's bishop, but that would also come with risk.
Will he really do that?
He's hinting, Judith. That's the type of thing Hikaru does.
I believe that it's a kind of a panic move also, that if I have to, avoiding losing any material or whatever, I'm going to play g4. Or when you're going to have 20 seconds on your clock, I'm going to play g4.
Right, but it's something that Fabi will have to consider at every move, and it will cost him maybe 2 seconds. You know, that
I think he's waiting for it, to be honest. He's waiting for it to weaken the white king. It's actually, I'm not even sure he's not going to play f5 at some point.
Oh.
To stop g4 and also to try to play possibly sometimes f4.
Well, the center is very stable for black. Do you think black can go follow through with, after f5 with g5?
You never know, especially in Blitz. But knight b1, I think, is a smart move to strengthen the knight on f3 and to relieve the queen from e2. And also to open up the line for the rook. But I prefer to play it with black.
Yeah, and big threats on the board. Black was threatening to take a pawn in the center, hitting the white queen and opening up some tactics along the file. So white's queen has dropped back. Hikaru's in defensive mode, I've got to say. I think the opening was not a success at all, but he is still rock solid, Hikaru Nakamura. Can he turn things around? I just love what Fabi's been doing, and also he's been doing it quickly. Fabi still up 30 seconds on the clock as black. But the next few moves might be decisive in terms of the kind of narrative of this game. Now Fabi's opened up those rooks on the c-file. Some mass exchanges, some mass trades. Black can still maybe occupy the c-file if white does trade now.
I believe g4 knight e5 can happen, actually. Because knight on e5 gives a great opportunity for white. And centralize the knight. Of course, I'm not very happy that white exchanged the rook on the c-file, because c-file is extremely important. That's the only open file, right? So if black can control that and keep control over there, that's the only way black can get better.
Yep.
And we'll take a look. I mean, he's inviting black to actually put the queen on c2, attacking the rook, as David said. But one thing we have seen time and time again from Hikaru, as we also see our chat mention, that Hikaru is incredibly resourceful. He gets into bad positions, he survives them, he turns them around. And
he's definitely one of the best defenders in chess history, I think, Jovanka, especially in rapid and blitz chess. But look at what he's doing, just quiet moves, getting the white rook out of the pin along this diagonal. And now what can Fabi make? He's got the open c-file, but he needs something a bit more tangible.
But the knight on e5 will show up, and that's something you prefer to avoid with black, but I think black cannot stop.
And
strange move there from Fabi. Queen to b7, looks a bit passive.
He wants to go a6, I believe. But I'm also thinking that it's kind of slow.
And the knight does appear in the center of the board. Now, humor me, guys. How realistic is the threat of g2, g4?
Oh, it's coming in the next move. But I think in the last 3 moves, there was a huge shift in this game. Because white is not worse at all. White's queen on b4 is just nice. Knight shows up on f4 shortly.
What do you think? Trade those knights now. Does Hikaru have any more? We talk about queen and knight versus queen and bishop, often favoring the queen and knight,
I would
actually.
exchange on c4. And now black has to decide whether d takes e4. Now the structure is not simple. White can show up with the pawn on e4, d5. And the pawn structure on the king side with the g6 weakness, it can be vulnerable for black.
Yeah, for the first time in this game, there's a real imbalance, and it's really not clear who this favors. In terms of clock times, it's still Fabi slightly ahead, but Hikaru has easier moves.
Interesting move because it stops b5, a5 opportunity for black. At the same time, it can also give weaknesses for white. Bishop e8 and attack the a4 pawn. Or regrouping the bishop to d3.
Yeah, and I like Hikaru's last moves, you know, just getting ready, as David indicated, to blockade that pawn on c4, and maybe also jumping into f4. Bishop will retreat, or maybe it will step forward.
Yeah, some issues potentially along the c-file. There's a pin. Could white push forward with b3 at some point, isolate black's pawns over there? Hikaru now under 20 seconds, Fabi just over 20 seconds. If it does come down to a time scramble, I think Hikaru is a big favourite. If it's just a few seconds each, his instincts are so good in these positions.
And, well, talking about instincts, David, what you predicted is actually happening on the board. The pawn has been undermined. And again, this is risky for Hikaru.
Extremely risky for both, I would say.
Yes, I go in your direction, then it's risky for everybody. But knight on c3, it can be regrouped to c3. f3, he's provoking.
Wow.
But I think it favors white to have f3.
Yeah, black's bishop could get locked out the game if it retreats to a bad square. White will start advancing forward in the center a bit later on. First, that white knight is going to sit in front of the black passed pawn. That has to be plan 1 from Hikaru Nakamura.
I believe that bishop on h7 can stop some of black's important squares for the king.
Well, big question here for white is how are they going to handle this pawn on d4 that's now under fire?
It's 7 seconds.
7
on the clock.
seconds, and Hikaru just calmly steps forward and moves his king to defend the knight. Wow, can you do that? I thought he was going to go bishop takes knight.
Yeah, Fabi playing really ambitious chess there.
He wants to win.
Yeah.
Especially after his last game, I think. He wants to show that he's back.
And he's coming in.
Have rook b2.
Yeah, the black rook's coming in. The black queen is hitting some loose pawns. White's king is more vulnerable than its counterpart right now. Hikaru needs to be clever here. Oh, he made that move with just a couple of seconds left.
Is it time to
3 seconds
bring
for
the
Fabi
rook into the second row? What's happened?
I think we have a draw agreement. Wow, Fabiano with the advantage, but on the clock. Really precarious stuff. And wow, that shows how much respect they have each other, but also it shows how much they both dislike their positions. Crazy stuff.
I think black won.
I think
wow,
Hikaru
it wasn't a draw.
lost. Yes, because white and Nakamura lost on time.
Wow, Hikaru flagged. You'll see that once in a lifetime. Hikaru Nakamura losing on time. His position was difficult, but wow, Judith, a shock.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very interesting for me how the opening developed. That Nakamura is playing so solid, And then suddenly something went very wrong, and I felt it that he was not sure. Am I playing for a win? What am I playing for? And you could see that the bishop was always going back and forth. Bishop g6, bishop f7, bishop g6, bishop d3, bishop e4, bishop f5, bishop a2. It was like a touring of the bishop.
Yeah, I mean, you're right completely. You know, Hikaru just went there to, just to neutralize Fabiano, and ended up being indecisive. Yeah. And his strategy just did not work. But losing on time though, that does hurt. And well, I think all the games have finished. And
all decisive.
All decisive. Is there any surprise there? And
I think the big news of the round is that Magnus Carlsen is finally back. He's scored his first win of the Blitz tournament in round 4. He's no longer in last place, and just to show how it happened, against Abdusattorov, Magnus had outplayed him. White has the advantage here, but this clever move after the Black Knight retreated. Bishop to d8, you pin and you win. Yeah, a bit of a misstep there from Abdusattorov. Magnus won the Black Rook and went on to convert his material advantage. We expected it. He was going to come back sooner or later, right?
Yeah, that's always the case, right?
There's a few things that are certain in life, and that is one of them. Magnus will always make a comeback. He is the master of doing that. And, well, other results, it just seems like things have gone in the expected ways. We do see that Mamedyarov continuing his winning ways, beating Ariantari. He is on fire.
Yeah,
it can happen for him. He's that kind of guy who starts winning and maybe he does not want to stop for some time.
He's also another one who would love an extra white in the classical portion, Mamedyarov.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And let's work through the Blitz standings after round 4. And at the top of the table after that victory against Ariantari, it has to be Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, a very impressive player. And in second place, last year's winner of the Blitz portion is Wesley So, Alireza Firouzja, Hikaru Nakamura. 2.5 and 2 points respectively. And Magnus Carlsen there on 7th place with his victory taking him up to 1.5 points out of 4. Ooh, what do you guys think about that last round?
Well, I think for Magnus, for example, it's somehow he puts himself in a very difficult position where everybody thinks already that, okay, this is not his day. And then from the last place, it is nice to go forward and make progress and eventually possibly win the tournament even. But yeah, then the Nakamura game was also very interesting. I haven't seen the other ones, but yeah, a lot of fire. I mean, you can see that the players are really in the mood to fight and they just give all in and they don't have this pressure that nothing gets stake practically, right? So they go out and they lose, they win, they draw.
Yeah, it's not just that they want to win. There's also a lot of nerves. I must admit, I've been watching Hikaru Nakamura's stream for years. I've never seen him lose on time, ever. So to lose on time, even if his position was difficult...
But he's not playing Fabian's stream.
True. Or at least very rarely.
And maybe he's extremely good in mouse work, right?
True. Very different over the board, right, Jovanka?
It is completely different and over the board stuff on chess. And when it comes to predictions, can I be bold and ask you guys, who do you think is going to win?
Well, it's kind of boring to say that it's Mamedyarov, right? Well, let's make a bet that Magnus wins.
Magnus?
Yeah, if he wins all the game, I think it's still possible.
Even though he's 2 points behind the lead right now? Yeah, I guess we're not even at halfway in the Blitz tournament, still 5 rounds to go. I won't say Magnus, I'll say Wesley So. Just, I don't know, I have a feeling just he's so solid, you'll never see him kind of get too flustered. And if the others do start to go a bit up and down, if Mamedyarov loses his hot streak, then someone like Wesley could capitalize.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with both of you, and I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and say Hikaru Nakamura. Even though he just lost, I still think that he is a formidable player and he'll be able to bounce back. And talking about bounce backs, we do have to look at round 5 matchups. And once again, we have some treats in store for all of you folks watching both home presence and at home. And there we can see Fabiano Caruana will play Magnus Carlsen. Anish Giri faces off against Hikaru, and Gukesh plays Alireza Firouzja. Shakria plays against Wesley So, and Nordibek, he does need to make a comeback, plays against Arian Tari. So what pairings catch your eyes?
I have 2 games. I have Magnus So, and of course Fabi Magnus.
Okay.
Yeah, Fabi Magnus for me. I want to see whether Magnus can continue his comeback and also whether Fabiano can really push on after beating Hikaru in the last round.
Yeah, for me, I think I want to see how the juniors get on. Juniors, I say that lightly, they're teenagers. Gukesh against Firouzja. Oh, it's very exciting.
I forget that they're so young, and now they've been on the scene for ages, these teenagers. They've been grandmasters for years despite still being in their teens. Yeah, I'm excited to see also how they do in the classical. I think that will be the real that's what they're focusing on, those younger players. The Blitz for them, just gaining experience.
But they are taking one at a time. So now it's the next game. It's only 6 minutes or 7 minutes that they have to fight it out. And I think still they are really enjoying playing Blitz. Don't you love to play Blitz?
I do. I'm jealous of those guys. I want to be out there playing. How about you, Judith? If you had the opportunity, would you be sitting at the board right now?
Well, sometimes it's tempting to play some Blitz games, even though I did not really play since I retired. But it's also fun to watch. But probably in a few years' time, maybe I will get back and play some Blitz games.
I saw you beat Magnus in Blitz last year in the park in Madrid.
And talking about Magnus, we definitely have to check out the encounter that you guys have been raving about. Magnus Carlsen against Fabiano Caruana. And there you can see Magnus, he is a 5-time Norway Chess winner. And incidentally, he's won 4 tournaments in a row. So if he wins Norway Chess this year, he will have got I'm thinking of the word, it's not a hat trick, apparently that's 3. It will be an Olympic gold medal, I don't know. And then he's also 5-time FIDE world champion and reigning 4-time world rapid champion, as well as reigning Blitz champion. And well, he has the highest rating ever, right? 2853. He's been higher rated than that, hasn't he? He was closing on 2900. And that's his goal, he said.
Yeah, he's maybe taken his eye off classical chess in recent months, but yeah, he still has a lot of goals left to accomplish, and I think the first goal is to try and win this Blitz tournament despite the difficult start, Magnus Carlsen. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how his form picks up after that last game.
And it's interesting that he won so many times this tournament, because many of the players, strong players, have problems to play front of home crowd. So it's also kind of tricky, right, to play front of home crowd. And well, it's going to be interesting what we're going to see today, just in the next 1 hour and a half.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because traditionally, everyone, when they talk about Norway Chess and Magnus, they say, oh, well, he doesn't do very well in Norway Chess. And that's because his results have been streaky, because yes, he did win last year, but he also had some defeats in the Armageddon portion. He lost to Anand, he lost to Arian Tari, he also lost to Wesley as well. But still, despite all this, he bounced back and managed to win the whole event. And he said, I remember in an interview, I hope this quietens the critics now, that I do well in Norway Chess. What more can you ask of me? And there we see Wesley So getting ready for his encounter.
Yeah, we're waiting Shakhriyar Mamajorov, the leader of the Blitz event so far, to sit down and start his game against Wesley. Of course, we have other matchups that we will be following too, but Wesley looks calm, I've got to say. If you talk about Blitz, he is always one of the favorites, and now we see Anish Giri facing Hikaru. Can Hikaru recover from the shock of losing on time in the previous game? Anish as well. He's definitely one who's improved in Blitz and Rapid Chess over the last couple of years. And I think the other big matchup, neither players are sitting at the table, but we'll come to that very shortly. Anish against Nakamura in front of us.
And I think generally it's very important for the top players, right? How can they recover in a Blitz tournament, for example? Just within minutes, they have to recover and forgive themselves what they have done. I mean, losing on time, right? That's the kind of the worst possible scenario can happen to you, especially if you're such a player like Nakamura. And I think this resilience is so important for the players, and they have it all.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. They're superhuman almost. They are able to shut down all emotions and focus on the moves, focus on the board, forget the past. For me, that's the most difficult thing. But we do indeed see Fabiano Caruana against Magnus Carlsen. Very different poses. I think they're both itching to get going. And predictions for this game?
Ooh, Magnus wins. If I want him to win the tournament, if I want to give at least the chance of it that he completes my prediction, then he has to win this game, actually all the game.
Yeah, and Magnus has a huge score actually against Fabi in Blitz chess. I remember in the Speed Chess Championship last year, Magnus cruised to victory and won nearly all of their games. And okay, it's only 3 moves in, but it's the English opening and a very provocative start from Magnus Carlsen. He's moved the black bishop a couple of times. White's knights have danced into the center of the board. Still a well-known position, of course, but with a reputation of being slightly better for White. And Fabi, starting with the English, shows he really wants to win as well.
And there he goes. You know, he's chasing away the dark square. Bishop was threatening to take the center. And one thing that I found very interesting in Fabiano's podcast, he kind of talked about how he rationalizes his losses and these big moments. And he just kind of just says, well, you know, it's no big deal. I've suffered worse defeats in my career, and I'm just going to move forward. And there you can see the players just simply developing. It seems very straightforward for both sides at the minute.
Yeah, Judith, it looks like a reverse Sicilian. Looks like a Sicilian with colours kind of swapped here. Who do you prefer?
I think Magnus should be happy for this opening because it's going to be a very complicated game with a lot of options, plans, complications. And this is something what you want to have, right? You don't want to play Rai Lopez or Italian even. It has more life in this position. That's what I would think, that he's going to bring back his bishop to d6. Then he's going to be developing knight d7, knight f8. Somehow it seems to me that there is kind of an easy play for black also.
Yeah, there we go. He does drop back his bishop, preserving those pieces. Black center, I think it's been a huge success for Magnus Carlsen right now. But Fabi advancing on the queen side, b4. Still yet to be decided how black is going to develop. And okay, first putting pressure on those advanced white pawns.
Yeah, now white is asked, do you want to play bishop b2 rook b1, or you want to play b5?
Well, he answered by pushing his pawn. I mean, what do you think about that? Because it does give the opportunity for black to lock down in the center, as he's done. I like it too. I'm a big center person, and you give me pawns in the center, I'm just completely ecstatic.
Yeah, now big decision. Okay, Magnus does trade knights, leaving white with doubled e-pawns, and yeah, there you go, as you predicted,
look what
Ivanka.
a pass pawn black have.
He's locked it in, protected pass pawn, and that's going to be a thorn in white's side for the rest of the game. You don't even necessarily want to capture this pawn in the center, because it will just be replaced by a fellow pawn. Black will gain control of some more squares, and white's knight is going to act as a blockader. There we go, onto d3, sitting on a nice pretty square. It's still yet to be seen the breakthrough, but Magnus goes for it.
Look at that. 5.
Oh.
This is my kind of chess.
It's not a joke.
No, it really is not. I mean, it's it's actually really serious, because you can't capture the pawn on f5 because, of course,
It's like
e5, e4 is coming.
Let out the lion of the cage.
Yeah, I must admit, I've learned a lesson here. I'm never going to doubt Judith's predictions.
Yeah, huge success for Magnus Carlsen, and okay, here you can choose.
C takes d4.
Yeah, there we go, he does, and white's
Knight
just blockading.
f6.
Oof, Judith, you want to be out there. You want to be there at the board, don't you?
I don't know, but knight f6, even sometimes it's confusion whether you want to take on e4 later, or you want to play f4 and g5 and g4 and just go for it. No, the very solid h6.
Yeah, because
Knight
he wants your knight f6, but doesn't want to allow the possibility of bishop g5 pinning that knight. It's nice. This is Magnus at his best.
Yeah,
He's back in business.
he's back in the flow. Again, you can't take this pawn because black advances pawn to e4 with a fork. One of the white minor pieces will drop off. But yeah, what else do you do with Fabi? You could just move your rook into the center, but that won't change anything.
Somehow you want to push c5.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I would think of with white.
If you go down, you might as well go down fighting, right?
Well,
I have another. Oh no, now it's been taken away from me. But I did think that it was possible to go bishop
G5.
Oh, G5. That scares the living daylights out of me. I don't know how I'd handle that.
G5, G3.
G3, yeah.
White can escape with the bishop, step G3 and come back.
Over optimistic on that.
Magnus just develops, hitting a pawn. Very sensible stuff. Maybe he's going to reroute his bishop kind of via F7 round this way to put more pressure.
I'm not sure. Sometimes the bishop on C8 stands better, more powerful than on E6, because blocking the rook, I mean, it has its drawbacks. At the same time, I completely understand that he wants to have connection between the rooks and development, just to have everything.
Yeah.
Bishop F7 I like, though, with bishop G6 idea.
And Fabi now moving to under a minute, which does, of course, play a factor in your psychological state.
Yeah, I think it was just those huge blows of throwing all the pawns forward for Black. Fabi, it's hard to react when your opponent does that. Your opponent's just kind of going for you, and it takes 30 seconds just to kind of figure out what to do, let alone actually kind of calculate. And here we go, Fabi playing a move like A4, non-committal, useful of course, but it cost him a lot of time, 30 seconds now for him. And Magnus just continues bringing all his pieces.
C5. Eventually C5 will happen, but probably Black is forcing C5, so takes everything on E4 and bishop D5.
Yeah, that's
then E4.
And you say thank you for the light squares. And actually, you might see it happen right now because the players are following that line you mentioned, Judith.
Yeah,
take bishop D5 and E4. Oh,
yeah.
This is the kind of position you want to get away, run away with white pieces. You don't want these challenges.
You kind of want to go, let's take back. This didn't work out.
Those pawns are rolling. Oh, queen E1.
I would go queen G4 at least to have one active piece.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Magnus doesn't care about the A5 pawn. Instead, he's just motoring forward with his pawns.
He could take on C5. No, he just wants to smash.
He wants to checkmate. The pawns are rolling.
Is E3 something to think about, or could you go...
Whether it works or not, it's just too tempting.
Yeah, or just play E3 and then bishop C5.
Exactly.
Yeah, this pawn also
there's
hanging.
a lot of temptation.
And
queen F5 is very powerful also.
Well, there we can see it's bishop D2 given a question mark. And Magnus centralizing the queen.
I think
getting out of harm's way.
Yeah, really instructive. He's not calculating. He's saving his time for later. Magnus probably had a direct win. He could have thrown pawns forward, but why burn time? Why take big risks there? He's won the pawn back, level material. And look at his center. And
look at Fabi's clock time. You know, just making moves with seconds left on the clock. And Magnus has an overwhelming position. And are we going to see another trade of rooks? No.
Oh. E3 we're going to see.
Yes.
Just in a second.
I'm waiting for it.
Well, not yet, maybe. Maybe bishop C5 back.
Here it comes.
Yeah, and that white king is being shorn of its protection here. Go on, Judith, you've spotted something.
No, I thought that I wouldn't like to leave the bishop on A7, so white can play B6. That's the only thing worries.
Isn't E2 going to be a
queen C7,
killer blow, yeah.
Oh wow, some tactics, some huge tactics against the white king. The white knight's acting as a blockader, trying to plug that diagonal. But okay, at least Fabi's found a way to lock out black's bishop and trade some pieces.
I wouldn't be happy with black when white bishop on E4. Simply, black has too much of an advantage. Maybe in G5 and bishop D5.
Yeah, I think we're going to see that happen right now. And there we see white's knight has left the board. And both players, seconds left. Fabi, no time. Oh, he's lost on time.
But I'm afraid that was not the only problem.
Yeah, lost position for Fabi at the end. He was about to get checkmated on the light squares, but yeah, too slow. The clock deciding this game as well. And still some action going in the other ones as we do see. And firstly, Magnus Carlsen. The streak continues. Let's jump into another game. Anish Giri against Hikaru Nakamura. It's a rook end game. Looks roughly level, but the clock might also have a role to play in this one, Judith.
Well, it seems like pretty drawish. I would be very surprised if this will have a decisive result, because maybe there was something wrong, because maybe Hikaru had a better position because he's shaking his head. And he's not happy with the draw, but it is.
And there you go.
Handshake.
Handshake. For a second there, I thought Hikaru might forget himself and lose on time. But, you know, he didn't.
Did he?
No.
Because on the clock I see 000, but probably it was just they did not stop
They didn't stop the clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Kings are in the center of the board, so that one was a draw. And only one game remaining in this round. It's Gukesh against Firouzja, a battle of the teenagers. We've been talking about the young players, and White has a knight in that game, but Black has all the pawns.
This is a funny end game, but it should be a draw because the h6 pawn is far, far away, and the White King is stopping the other passed pawn. So there is no other outcome unless White is losing on time, because even if Black losing on time, no mating piece on the board. So
Knights are notoriously bad though at stopping these h-pawns, stopping these rooks
but
pawns.
what happened?
The pawn is running. He's just
But what
not stopped
happened?
it.
He didn't bring his knight.
Nope. And Alireza Firouzja taking home the point. Yeah, I wasn't so sure about that knight endgame. I mean,
What do you mean the pawn was on h6 only?
There must have been a way to draw, but he just forgot to bring his knight back. There was
Yeah,
no
he
time
felt
for the
it's
White King
just-
to run.
Oops.
That type of thing can happen with only a few seconds on the clock.
Exactly.
Poor Gukesh. He fought so well, but in the end, Firouzja taking the point. And wow, another bloodthirsty round. So many more decisive games, and often decided by the player with more time being on the attack. Wow, just breathless action here, Jovanka.
absolutely. It's been lots of intense moments, and we do have to take a recap of round 5 scores. And there we see at the top of the table, Fabiano Caruana losing with the white pieces to Magnus Carlsen. It was a draw between Anish Giri and Hikaru Nakamura, whereas Gukesh, we just saw, tumbled against Alireza Firouzja, and it also a draw between Shakria and Wesley. And it was a very important point for 18-year-old Nordibek Abdusatorov, who defeated Arian Tari, who still is trailing. You know, he only won one game. And this is lining up very nicely because we now passed the halfway mark. 4 games remaining.
Wow.
4 games remaining, and let's check out some of the action from that previous round. And it was here where Abdusatorov with the white pieces was able to outfox Arian Tari of Norway after pawn takes rook here. It looks like White's pawn is about to promote, but it can be snapped off the board. And after bishop takes pawn, White was able to jump in with those tricky knights, winning a pawn on the f6 square. And after this pawn dropped, I think that signaled the end of the game. The other pawn later went on to fall, and Abdusatorov, with his knights dancing around, was able to take the full point. Small margins, fine margins at this top level, but very quick and very tricky to see this type of idea with no time on the clock. Abdusatorov really showing his class in this endgame.
It's his trademark, right? He's a universal player, but he's also fantastic at endgames. And poor Arian Tari, you know, he is the underdog here, and he will definitely be struggling in the main. Well, that sounds bad, but it's not bad. But you know,
Well, he's the lowest rated player,
exactly.
and that's why obviously everybody wants to hunt him down, right? And of course, it's very difficult if, let's say, he's losing one game, then he can lose his self-confidence. He doesn't have such a huge experience on this level.
Yeah, and talking about the standings, let's take a look. At the top is still Shakriar Mamajarov with a very impressive 4 points out of 5. And in joint second, we have Alireza and Wesley So, both on 3.5 points out of 5. Magnus Carlsen, with his 2-win streak, has now inched up to 4th place. And there at the bottom, 9 and 10, have Gukesh and Arian, both on 1 point out of 5.
Not a very nice birthday day
No.
for Gukesh. Especially the last game was also quite annoying. But after all, they are the ones who are going to say, oh, okay, it's just a Blitz tournament.
Yes, but they're going to play with 5 blacks.
Well,
So-
there is a very good chance for that, but okay, they are very young. So.
Yes. Okay, well, still 4 rounds remaining. Still, they can claw back some points. Ooh.
Anything can happen.
Yeah. It's not how you start, it's how you finish, was one of my friend's mantras when it comes to chess. And let's take a look at the round 6 matchups. And once again, I keep saying this, but we have the world's best players playing here in Norway, so that means we are going to be treated to some fabulous matchups. And there we have at the top Hikaru Nakamura against Magnus Carlsen, and then we see Ariantari against Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So second place against Nordebek, whereas Alireza Firouzja will be playing against the tournament leader Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, and Anish Giri will play Gukesh, who seems to be struggling on his 17th birthday.
Yeah, and I think there's only one game that we're going to be following in this round, and that's between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Where else? But it could also be decisive for the standings.
Well, actually, we were very close to see a World Championship match of that two players, right? And I think it's one of the most interesting matchup right here, because of course Nakamura is not a player who is afraid of Magnus, and they have some special environment when they are just between them, right, across the board. So I'm really waiting something special in that game. And Magnus is black again.
Yeah, and in recent times, Hikaru has maybe had the upper hand. He beat Magnus last year on the Speed Chess Championship. His results online have been very good against Magnus in a bunch of Title Tuesdays recently. Feels like Magnus, he's let Hikaru get in his head, and for years it was the other way around. So that one is going to be fascinating to watch. Yeah,
definitely. And we have to remember that Hikaru is actually number 2 when it comes to Blitz ratings. You know, he's there pushing Alireza Firouzja, so it's not going to be an easy matchup at all for either side. Who do you think, if I'm going to put you on the spot, who do you think will be the one to edge it out? Okay, and here we can see some stats for Hikaru. He's 5-time US chess champion, reigning 5-time speed chess champion. Also, I forgot the stat, but again, it's there. He's the reigning world Fischer Random world chess champion, and as well as being PCL champion with Gotham Knights. And he's also American Cup winner as well. You know, he's won so many things in 2022 and 2023.
After he was saying that he's kind of non-professional anymore,
yeah,
right?
I know. Yeah, let's also discuss that. You know, he says that he's a streamer. He spends a lot of time streaming after this. I'm sure he will be making a video and producing content, discussing. I mean, how can you do that and still play world-class chess?
I think the only thing it can help that you put your nerves of all this pressure what you have, because of course there are a lot at stake when you play in tournament, and you put a lot of pressure on yourself, you make a lot of preparation, you take everything so seriously. And since he went on streaming, he experienced something else, that he gains a lot of self-confidence. He's successful somewhere else also, as much as in the world of chess. And somehow it balances out, I think, pretty well for him. That, okay, he does that. When he goes to tournament, he's playing with less pressure on his shoulders.
It's just a way to relax himself. Interesting. Because we've seen, David and I have seen him play like a main tournament, and then while he was waiting for the games to begin, he would play another tournament in between rounds.
And then he'd go back and go on stream for hours at a time. The man has endless stamina, Hikaru. And I think despite not thinking of himself as a professional, he's still spending more time than ever on chess. He's still studying chess, playing chess, and especially when it comes to Blitz, he's playing hours and hours every day. So, I think that can only help him in an event like this one. With classical chess, I think that's the real marvel, the fact that he can still perform so well there. But clearly he still works on openings. He's got a great second, Chris Littlejohn, who helps support him there. And yeah, he's of course he's naturally talented as well, and that really does help a lot. And I think the players are getting ready now in the auditorium. They're about to start their games. Here we see Wesley So still doing decently in the tournament against Abdusatorov. And we're itching. We're getting ready for that marquee matchup. Hikaru against Magnus. And the players just waiting for the arbiters to tell them that they can start the game, Judith.
And Wesley looking around. What's bothering him, or
just impatient to get going?
Maybe he's looking at the clock times. And there we see Fabiano with the black pieces facing off against underdog and the lowest rated tournament player of the tournament, Ariantari. Fabiano will be looking to win this one, and here comes one of our players, Hikaru Nakamura, with the white pieces. Will we see him switch up his opening?
Yeah, he's been playing very solid stuff, but not the most exciting stuff in the first few games with white, and that backfired against Caruana, Judith.
But maybe he will follow up the same thing, and he wants to provoke Magnus that, okay, I know you want to win. I know you want to win the tournament. I know that you want to kill me, so show me. I go to a very solid play. At the same time, maybe he's just going to be switching. And it's interesting that it's only a Blitz game, it's only a Blitz tournament, but for sure, when they sit down there and they play out this 5, 6, 7 minutes, they want to kill each other. Just in case.
Yeah, and both of them will have one eye on the standings as well. They know that Mamadjarov has stormed ahead into the lead and they'll be wanting to catch up. Meanwhile, wow, Magnus isn't at the board and the clocks have started. Hikaru playing his first move. Magnus, a bit of a gambit already, and it's not even move 1.
But you can see that Nakamura is kind of shocked that he did not show up in time.
And so is Magnus. You know, he seems to indicate.
But he's not in a rush. Look at that.
But this is Magnus's power move, right? We've seen him do that before. You know, when he arrived 2.5 minutes late for that game in the Blitz, you know, he literally adjusted all his pieces before he made his move. I mean, what kind of power move is that?
Wow, and the game has started after Magnus kind of gives Hikaru 30 seconds lead on the clock, and it's the exact same opening, Judith, that we've seen from Hikaru several times.
I'm not surprised. Not surprised. He decided this way. He's not losing and wasting energy, rethink what to do.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. This is what I decided. I want to put my energy and invest it in other things. In the middle game, end game, when you have to shuffle things the way to turn things around.
Wow, and Magnus taking a long think. It's only move 6. This is really surprising, kind of forfeiting a few minutes on the clock here, pretty much. And, okay, he plays bishop to f5, very logical move, developing pieces. And what does Hikaru have in store? Just rock solid, almost a London system set up here for white. And the players will now just slowly develop their pieces. The action will be much later in the game. Magnus will hope that the clock times balance out before that.
Yeah, and Hikaru actually asking Magnus a question now with this last queen move. He's just saying, how are you going to defend the pawn on b7? And still, there are some questions there, because if the queen does step forward, I mean, first of all, if I were playing with the white pieces, I would come in with my bishop to the b5 square and get ready to jump in with the knight on e5.
Yeah, looks very tempting.
Now the question is whether bishop b5 can be played with an idea of knight e5, and what Magnus has in mind. Whether is he really going to play f6 to stop that?
Wow, just to cover the e5 square. It's possible. Magnus has done crazier stuff.
But maybe he just wants to go bishop d6 after bishop b5.
Yeah, well,
let's see.
Yeah, we'll find out the answer to the question. Okay, he trades knight. Now, is it too crazy to actually take that knight with the king?
The king will be stranded in the center of the board for the rest of the game.
That's true.
Wow, he plays it, Hikaru, really desperate to win here, and Magnus reacts lightning fast with f6. No knight jumps for you. And
but
wow,
king
this white
d2,
king.
I'm not sure it was a good sign that he went for this direction.
No, it was a bit one-track mind. I think he needed to.
Because where
capture
are you
with a
going
knight.
with your king? Usually you're not castling longside in these systems, right?
Right, and one other thing that is quite concerning for white is actually this light square bishop that black has on the f5 square, because the king is never going to find any safety on the queen side with that piece looming on the board.
I mean, black can even go very aggressive g5, g4 kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, oh,
Wow.
Well, maybe not anymore. Knight d4.
Alarm bells ringing though.
Ooh,
e5.
look
Step
at
forward.
that. Ooh, ooh.
But Hikaru really breaking all the rules, because, you know, we're taught, first of all, don't move your king into the opening, into the center, and then certainly don't open any lines.
He is Fischer Random World Champion though, and this does look like a Fischer Random game with the king out on d2. So will he get time after the queen trade that's about to happen to run back with his king to safety? I'm really surprised, I must admit, by Magnus's last move.
Very strange.
Yeah,
But
go for checkmate when your opponent's king is in the center.
Right.
That's what we're taught.
But I think he's just simply saying, look, the bishop on g3 locked out of the game,
That's true.
and let's continue the dancing on the queen side.
Okay, so go g5. h5.
Yeah.
Stepping forward with all the pawns. He's going to gain space on both sides, on both flanks here, as black. It's still a beautiful position here for Magnus, but I'm really shocked he didn't go for checkmate to try and punish
Well,
Hikaru.
maybe he just wants to play for two results, sorry.
I wish we could all play for one result, Judith.
And he thinks that, okay, probably Nakamura also will not feel too comfortable with this, with white, because he just sits and wait what kind of plans Magnus will work out. H4, G5, King G6, Rook D8. Oops.
Yeah, already.
What's this? D5 is hanging.
Yeah,
What's
Magnus
going on?
maybe just playing too slow. It feels like he's not quite in the zone in this game. Instead of going for checkmate, he's been forced to allow a bunch of trades.
But don't forget that bishop on H2.
Yeah, one bad piece. That's white's problem long term.
White has 9 pawns, maybe.
9 pawns and not enough pieces.
Yeah.
Okay, but at least some pressure has been relieved with this last exchange.
Magnus wants to be very instructive.
C5, C4, sorry.
In every game.
In every game.
Nakamura plays
It
this.
seems to be like the formula, right? Develop pieces, get C4 in. Ta-da!
Yeah, and some tactics, some tricks here. You have to be really careful as black, actually. This pawn's being undermined, and your knight is really loose in the center of the board.
Yeah, now it's
anyone's game.
I mean, it is white's idea, so if black were to double rooks on the C line, it's just simply to go B4
the problem for white, for black, that rook c8 does not work, because c takes d5, rook c1 takes on e6 and captures the knight on e4. And okay, the h2 bishop is bad, but 2 bishop versus the rook is plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge threats. How does Magnus deal with this? Pawn takes pawn is a winning idea if he gets time. Hikaru Nakamura. Suddenly the clocks as well. Magnus down to 30 seconds. He's going to regret kind of forfeiting that 30 seconds.
He played
earlier.
too fast, made decisions.
Oh.
Wow, action.
It is all happening. Fire on the board, lots of calculation to be done.
And right now, white can go a pawn up in the endgame if they just, if Hikaru here just takes this black bishop with a check and then recaptures on f3. But he's thinking of something else.
But if he were to grab that pawn, his bishop on h2 would be saddled there until the end of times. And that's something that is strategically really concerning.
Very interesting, this move what Magnus played g4.
He's not scared of getting his knight trapped on the edge of the board. I would be slightly kind of worried here if I were Magnus Carlsen. This black knight has no escape squares. That's why Hikaru has stepped forward. f4, taking away the g5 square from black's knight. Now all Hikaru needs is to teleport his king over to g2. Wow, no way back now for that piece. Magnus
F1.
playing with fire. Just king f1, retreat.
Rook g8, rook c7.
And white's playing with an extra piece, essentially. The white king, the white bishop, they are kind of cancelling out the black rook and knight right now. Magnus is totally stuck, totally immobilized. I hate what Magnus has been doing. And there we go, Judith. White's rook is activating. Could we see white just be winning in the next few moves?
It's quite a funny setup, having the bishop on h2 and knight on h3.
Don't try it at home. That's the problem. Actually, the bishop is coming into the game.
But Magnus is wriggling hard, you know. Now the rook has come to g4, h4 is threatened on the board.
Because king g2, knight f4 takes h4.
Yes.
Takes, and then you go h4, you win back the piece, you win back the white bishop at the end. But I don't understand why Hikaru's, there we go, not just activating his rook. You can hit my bishop, but I'll just happily retreat, and the black knight's still trapped for the rest of the game.
And Magnus under 20 seconds, and his position is concerning.
Yeah, his position's more than concerning. It might just be lost here. And under 10 seconds, as you say, Ivanka. What next? Where's he going with that black king? Really mysterious stuff. He can barely move, and now Nakamura's just going pawn hunting, going for black's pawns on the queen side. Grab them. Why not?
Well, how many seconds? 15 seconds for Hikaru. And he's taken some time out just to see whether he can grab the pawn. And
He wants to go king g4. But now what? Knight f2, king
Wow.
h3. He has his magic ideas.
This is the definition of magic, Judith. Look at what he's done. The black king has crept into the position. He's going for the win, Magnus, if he can get his king into the f3 square. Hikaru has to pull the brakes, and he has to do it now. He's a piece up, Hikaru, but white's bishop is so trapped.
And the clock is ticking down, and the king has come to f3. Wow. What a resource by Magnus.
Oh, the pawns are disappearing. Still some checkmate threats. Black's e-pawn threatening to come forward.
And look at the clock. Both players, seconds left.
Indecision there from Magnus.
King F4.
He's just not taking a free pawn there, it feels like. Okay, but he can go back in.
Now.
Magnus has got to draw up his sleeve if he wants it, it feels like. He can bring his king across. Hikaru's just repeating now, bringing his rook, trying to give a check. Hey, Magnus takes the pawn. Black has to be the favourite here, Judith.
Well, those two extra pawns, F4, F3, and nothing will stop him. F3.
Keep pushing.
No, go three times around still.
He's just repeating moves here. Gaining time on the clock. The players do have a 2-second increment, but he's stuck. How can he break through here, Magnus Carlsen?
King F3 and it's gone.
Ooh, he's
E2,
curled up into a ball.
E2 and rook B1.
Judah, I think you spotted a direct win there. He's still going to find it though, Magnus Carlsen. He's got 3 pawns now, the B pawn running. Hikaru is about to resign. 3 pawns is too much.
Very relaxed, Magnus, just sitting there. What kind of H3 knight he had?
I mean, oh my God, what a game. What a turnaround. I mean, this just goes to show it's all about holding the nerves when the clock is ticking down on its final seconds. And here comes F3. Oof.
What's that?
Isn't F?
What's that? F2?
Do anything at this point. Pawns are rolling. Black is about to win. And Hikaru offers his hand.
Ooh, what a painful loss for Nakamura. This is not the way Magnus wanted to win.
No, but there's such a genius plan, giving up his knight and just entering with the Black King. Just so resourceful to see that idea, that plan from moves ahead with no time on his clock. Magnus deserving it in the end, but yeah, earlier play, questionable to say the least.
Well, it was basically after the opening, it was like full, huge advantage, right?
And there you can see the big smile on Magnus's face because he knows he got away with it. But I have to say, I mean, it was incredibly well fought by Magnus. I mean, he had at some point quite a terrible position, but he found a way how to mix things up and confuse Hikaru. And we do have to take a look at the round 6 scores. And there we see Magnus Carlsen winning an important point. And it was also an important point for Fabiano Caruana as he beat Ariantari. And Wesley So lost to Nordibek Abdusatorov. And Alireza Firouzja, he won against Shakhriyar Mamedyarov. So Shakhriyar stepping down the rankings. And it was an important win for Gukesh on his birthday as he now moves on to 2 points. Oh, fighting chess. I mean, Norway Chess, it is the Wimbledon of chess, home to fighting chess, and the players, they are proving it here in the opening Blitz. I know it's just seedings and colours up for grabs, but boy, the players are really giving it their everything. And shall we take a look at the standings?
Let's do it.
And at the top of the table, there's been some movement because Alireza Firouzja is now on 4.5 points out of 6. He is half a point ahead of Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, and look who's moved up the rankings. Magnus Carlsen, he's now on 3.5 out of 6, alongside Wesley So and Nordibek Abdusatorov. And at the bottom, poor old Ariantari, who seems to be having a tough day. Whew. And, well, I think we've seen a lot of hair-raising moments, a lot of intense challenges, and we are going to take a breather as we take a break and going into round 7. That's my move. Oh yeah, do you want to be black? Okay.
We have a No Boys Allowed chess club because it feels like in chess sometimes there's too many boys who are just, you know, critical or judgmental. It's a pretty intimidating space, or it can be when you go to a chess club and there's no other girls there. So we want this to be a place where girls feel comfortable playing chess. It doesn't matter if you're good or a beginner. That's what the Chess Cave is for.
Hello, and we are back, and it's time to reignite that chess fire, as there's now been a change at the top. It is Firouzja who has toppled Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, and let's dive into the round 7 matchups. It is Magnus Carlsen against Aryan Tari. Gukesh takes on Hikaru Nakamura. Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, Anish Giri, and Nordibek Abdusatorov against tournament leader Alireza Firouzja. He's also incidentally the #1 rated Blitz player in the world. And then we finally have the All-American matchup between Fabiano Caruana and Wesley So. Ooh, there's some exciting games ahead. Which ones are your favorites?
For me, I think I want to see Gukesh Nakamura also, what's going on, and of course the youngsters.
Yes.
Nordibek and Alireza.
And the players are off, and we can see it looks like it's a Queen's Pawn opening.
It looks like the Spanish opening. Yep, the Roy Lopez. It's an early stage in this game. The players have just started, but a quick start between these two teenagers, and not so theoretical. Here, Abdusatorov with white has chosen a slower approach. Dart squared bishops are off, but everything else still on. Very tense. And Judith, you had some experience with these types of openings in your career?
Not really. I was never a big fan of exchanging the bishop on e3, to be honest. I like to have my bishop in g5 or to play bishop d2 and somehow bring my classical idea for the knight to e2, g3, f5 or something like that. At the same time, I like it kind of having the bishop on b3, having the rook on the f file. So it can give some nice, powerful initiative for white, I think. Queen e1 is very typical, going queen h4 or queen g3. Later on, bring double the rook on the f file, bringing out the knight to h4, f5. So that powerful bishop on b3 can be eliminated at the same time with the plan of bishop c8, bishop b6.
Yeah, and I think we're quite likely to see that. There's a lot of pressure on black's position, so you want to neutralize that by trading off pieces. But first, your plan there, Judith, knight h4, coming into f5. I would be terrified here, I've got to admit, if I were Firouzja, but experience does show, and engines do show that black does have nothing to worry about if you're defending carefully here. So interesting start to this game. Bishop e6 indeed on the board. I think if those bishops disappear, then black is far closer to equality, far closer to safety.
The question is whether can white go bishop d5 or knight d5. I think that's a big question.
Yeah, I think
knight d5, probably bishop d5, right? And he takes d5, knight e7, and what the b3 bishop will be doing.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that variation you just mentioned on the board. And yeah, change in pawn structure.
Rook f6, rook at that. That's the way to do it.
Well, you know, it's a nice positional sacrifice. After all, you do get control of the light squares, and you do weaken black's king. And, well, you see Alireza saying, doesn't bother me. I'm just simply going to return some material and simplify the position.
Yeah, he's saying, take my pawn, please take my pawn, because the white knight is active, the black knight passive, and that trade would only help black, who is material up. So now we'll see the black king slide into the corner. There we go. The black rook will slide over to the g file, where it will plug any holes, and no attack. It's all about that white bishop. You talked about it earlier, Judy. It was the pride and joy of white's position. Now it's just a dead block of wood.
Well, it will come back into play with c3 and bishop c2 eventually, especially after having the queen on f5. But I'm afraid f6 and queen c8 will be the next moves of black, or yeah, queen e7, rook g8. So it's white is kind of trying to look for compensation, which I'm not sure at all that he has enough.
I mean, is it so bad for white? Because white can reactivate the bishop, perhaps putting it to d1 and maybe to g4, and let it sit pretty on e6.
Yeah, that's a really nice maneuver, actually, and I think see it in action. Prediction game on point, Ivanka, gotta say. And yeah, I underestimated this maneuver. I thought the bishop would take 3 or 4 moves to get back. Instead, it's kind of right back in the action now. And black is struggling to untangle without dropping further pawns. Right now, white is up. Oh, sorry, white is down material. It's the exchange for a pawn, but still the black rook struggling to get in the game.
Black probably wants to exchange after all the queens, playing queen g6 in the next move. At the same time, white is very much on time, so he doesn't have to exchange the queens. He can move with the queen, and the f5 square is controlled 3 times, so black cannot push f5. So this way, it's not so easy for black either. So I think white will have enough compensation after queen goes back, bishop f5.
Yeah, it's essential to keep the queens on the board, right? Because with the queens off, the black rooks will gain in power later on. Black will be able to open up some lines, and there we go. Nice move. If queen takes pawn, I think black's queen will be caught on a bad circuit. The white bishop will plant itself on f5, and there's going to be a mating attack. You cannot get greedy there, so black sidesteps. Still, this one in the balance.
I mean, look at that. Just a few moves ago, the bishop was standing on b3 and we were kind of complaining, and suddenly magic happened and the bishop on e6, the best location for the bishop.
I officially eat my words. I said that bishop was a dead block of wood. Now it's the best piece in the position by a mile. Beautiful play by a beautiful maneuver from Abdusatorov.
But there is a problem with that bishop. Yeah, it's sitting lovely on that square. But, you know, the black rooks will simply travel on the dark squares, you know, lift themselves up, you know, e7, maybe even g7. And in the meantime, there's not that much white can do.
But there's not much black can do either.
True. Maybe it's just one of those games where everything is in balance until someone tries to disturb the force.
Now white wants to place the rook to f5 and control the square f5 and h5 possibly. Black will try to go rook g7, rook g5.
But not now. Or maybe you can do it. You can do it now. I thought the queen was going to get trapped, but no.
Well, now it's important for black that if the white rook moves, then f5 is possible.
Yeah.
And there was a big threat to take white's bishop, the only defender of the white rook, so white's pieces all have to be very careful here, protecting each other. And here we go, Firouzja is trying to do something, and that is open lines up for his rooks on the other side of the board, on the queen side. If he gets an open line or two, then long term his rooks might later be able to enter. And look how the evaluation bar didn't really like Abdusatorov's reaction there, opening up 2 files. But it makes a lot of sense. The white pieces look nice and pretty on the light squares. Black has some loose pawns. How to react here, and he's trying to get in.
Well, that's a very logical reaction for black to enter and enter to the second rank, bother a little bit the white king.
But how dangerous?
A bit.
It does look scary, but if we're cold-blooded about it, I mean, can you just go pawn grabbing? Because that's the first question I always ask myself.
Pawn grabbing for white?
White, yeah.
Yeah, I think white would love to grab some pawns, but first black has to decide whether to check.
What to do? King f3?
Oh, nerves of steel, Judith. King f3, marching forward. I would be too scared. I'd retreat my rook and just hope for survival.
Well, we're going to see the rook retreat, and now, well, pawns have disappeared from the board, and now big threat from white to actually capture the rook on f8.
Well, it's scary for black. Yeah. Exchange of...
Are we just going to see a perpetual check?
Yeah, the problem is black's rook might not be able to get in. I don't think you should go backwards. You might have been checkmated there by the black rook coming across and down, but instead white stepping forward with the king. And again, if you continue checking, the white king will find safety. It might find safety on this side of the board. So
yeah, but black will have to go for the perpetual check, and then that's it.
He doesn't.
Feels like a draw.
He doesn't have that much time as well. 14 seconds on the clock, and obviously this will have an impact on his decision making.
But both players are wildly ambitious in general. They hate those draws. So who's going to play on for the win? Firouzja's the first to start repeating. Will we see the handshake?
Seconds.
Moment of truth for Abdusatorov now, and we do see the draw by repetition. Wow, good result for both, and really well played game actually.
Yeah, a real tussle there, and Firouzja, he cements his lead at the top. And shall we have a look at someone else?
Yeah, let's go to another game. And Magnus against Ariantari, and it looks like there might be a big shock on the cards here. Magnus has been storming back. He's on a winning streak after a difficult start, and he might be going down to his countryman.
I think he blundered. Some huge blunder happened there, isn't it? Blundered mate in 1, mate in 2 or something.
Wow.
Wasn't that the case?
Well, we have a result. Magnus Carlsen did lose to Ariantari.
Yeah, and we will go back to delve into what happened in that clash between the 2 Norwegians here at Norway Chess. But first, the game remaining is Gukesh against Hikaru Nakamura, and this one is a very tight endgame. It should be a draw with best play, but anything can happen at this time limit. White has a rook and bishop, black has a rook and 3 pawns level material, but the side with the pawns must be the only one who can win here, surely. Hikaru, can he press this one to victory, do you think, Judith?
I don't know, but for sure he's going to be trying. I think, generally speaking, it should be a draw. unless there is a huge blunder. But we've seen something huge blunder by Gukesh previously, where he had knight versus 3 pawns, and he somehow failed to make a draw. But now I see that obviously he's focusing very much, and he doesn't want to let it happen again, something similar.
Yeah, and well, we can see Hikaru shaking his head, and he did let his clock go down to 7 seconds. But here comes the pawns, but it does look like Gukesh has a very comfortable blockade on the dark squares.
We should mention some symmetry in the previous clash between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. It was also rook and 3 against rook and bishop, but this one is very different. Now the pawns are easily blockaded by white's bishop and king. And this is about to be a draw.
It is. Just don't put the bishop on a bad square. Keep it in contact with the G2 pawn. And there you see the players.
Interesting way of finishing the game.
Finishing up, and it is a draw between Gukesh and Hikaru. And actually, incidentally, Gukesh is one of the few players to actually set up the pieces before he leaves.
Yeah, a lot of the players only set up the pieces if they've won the game. We saw that from Magnus Carlsen against Hikaru Nakamura, but either way, disappointing result for Nakamura, who no longer really can hope to challenge for first place in this Blitz tournament.
And it looks like Wesley So has an opinion on this endgame and is saying maybe this is how Hikaru could have perhaps pushed the point home.
Yeah, it's lovely actually to see the players analyze like this, to see them kind of analyze and just discuss purely the chess on its own. And yeah, missed opportunity potentially for Gukesh in this one. Hikaru's having none of it, however, and wants to get out of there.
Well, he has to get over it in a minute or two and start the next round, right? It's round 8 coming up.
Yeah.
Getting close to the end. So this was round 7.
Completely, and we should take a look at the round 7 scores, and we saw Magnus Carlsen losing in a shocking manner to Ariantari, and it was a draw between Gukesh and Hikaru, whereas it was also a draw between Shakhriyar and Anish, which means that Shakhriyar is still in 2nd place, and Nordibek Abdusattorov drew against Alireza Firouzja, meaning Firouzja is still half a point ahead of Shakhriyar, and also a peaceful result between Fabiano Caruana and Wesley So.
Yeah, and just to delve back into some of the events of the previous round, we did see Magnus Carlsen crash to a shock defeat to countryman Ariantari, and it was in this position Magnus had been losing some control. He had a winning position earlier in the game, but it was here that he finally slipped. He blundered simply a queen in one move. Here, for example, the safest would be knight takes bishop. You also have a variety of moves. You could step forward with b7 if you're feeling ambitious, but the one move not to play was retreating the white knight to the center, going for checkmate against the black king, but forgetting about black's attacking resources. Bishop c4 check. This must have been a shock to Magnus. Suddenly the white king is hit. Only one safe square for the king, and this would have ended in checkmate. Just a huge blunder, and after bishop c4 check, he was forced to part with his queen. But of course, he wasn't able to save this game. Queen takes bishop, and Arian went on to convert very smoothly. Big result for the standings.
Definitely a big result for the standings, and let's take a look at the set standings after 7 rounds. And Alireza Firouzja still at the top with 5 points out of 7. Half a point behind him is Shakhriyar Mammadjarov. Everything to play for. Wesley So half a point behind Shak with 4 points, as is Nordibek Abdusattorov. And Magnus Carlsen, well, he lost an important game there, and he's now on 3.5 points out of 7 alongside Fabiano Caruana. And Judith, are you shocked by some of these results?
Well, I think we can say that on Magnus, the way he lost, I'm kind of shocked, because everything went on the direction that he can give a good game and possibly win also the game. But it's very interesting how Alireza is just slowly but surely he's climbing up, and actually he's there number 1, right? And I'm very curious how Mammadjarov will be able to finish in his last 2 games.
Yeah, it feels like Firouzja with 2 rounds remaining must be the huge favourite. But as you say, Judith, if Mammadjarov gets back to the winning ways, gets back, especially if he strikes in this next game, nerves could be jangling. I think that first place, getting the first kind of opportunity to pick seeding for the classical tournament, that's what all the players, of course, are hoping for. But also in the middle of the pack is the top 5. So let's keep an eye on those games in the middle as well.
picking seedings. And one thing to be aware of is that if you do have first choice and you do pick seed number 1, you will start off with 2 whites. And the person who's unlucky to pick number 6 actually gets 2 blacks in the first 2 games.
Yeah, not the start you want. Black is top at the best of times, but especially against these giants, and potentially black in the Armageddon games, a huge disadvantage. So everything to play for in this next couple of rounds.
And talking about couple of rounds, let's take a look at the round 8 matchups. And it's Wesley So, last year's winner of the Blitz portion, against Magnus Carlsen, who's actually won the overall Norway Chess event 4 times in a row. And Hikaru Nakamura faces off against Ariane Tari. Alireza Firouzja plays Fabiano Caruana. Anish Giri plays Nordibek Abdusatorov, whereas 17-year-old Gukesh, it's his birthday, plays Shakria Mamedyarov. And Judith, which one is the biggest match for you?
I'm very curious how Gukesh can continue his tournament, and what is he going to show against Mamedyarov. I think that's one of the most interesting games for now.
And you, David?
Yeah, for me, it's actually the leader, Alireza Firouzja. Can he keep it up? If he wins his last 2 games, he's won it. He's won the Blitz tournament. So against Fabiano, he'll be hoping that he can strike now.
And do you think Alireza will manage to maintain his form? Because normally the players, when they reach a certain point, they start to coast it.
Yeah, nerves might kick in. If you relax too soon, it could backfire. I do, however, believe in Alireza. His blitz skills are just so good. He's so fast, and nerves don't seem to affect him that much. So I think he's the big favourite at this point.
Yeah, we have to remind ourselves as well. Alireza is number 1 in the blitz ratings at 2,900. That's just such a big rating.
And the players, they care. They care about blitz ratings. Magnus will be devastated by his last game, for example, because he's throwing blitz rating points away. So, yeah, important for many reasons, these last few games.
Not just the standings at stake. Oh, what a tournament so far.
A lot of stressful moments for the players, for sure. There will be a lot of things to recover for tomorrow.
How do they adapt back to classical chess after this madness, Judith? Crazy stuff.
And there'll be a lot of work for the seconds as well, because I'm sure the seconds will be there noting certain habits that players have.
Well, I think they just have to get over with it. Of course, after the tournament, for half an hour maybe, they will be discussing these kind of things. What has happened, what kind of blunder I did, what were the great or disappointing moments. At the same time, they will just go for dinner and think about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Prepare their mindset for the classical game.
Right. Are the results of the Blitz portion, that's something to reflect on later?
I don't think they will care.
They don't care
at all. They care a lot about the Armageddon part of the tournament. That will be very interesting, and that is something I think very challenging for the players, to switch from classical game to Armageddon, because it really counts.
Yeah, it's one of the few tournaments where when you have a draw, it's all decided by Armageddon, and that's quite a difficult mind shift as well. And there we can see Alireza getting ready to face off against Fabiano Caruana, stretching and
in a good mood.
Is certainly in a good mood. Now, interesting enough, I mean, would you categorize Alireza as a professional player? Because he said, he wants to take a step back from his chess playing because he wants to focus on design.
I would say he is still. I mean, until we're given more details about his career in fashion design, it seems to be what he still spends most of his time on, if not all. And he's still competing at a high level. How can you not be a professional player when you're taking down the best players in the world on a regular basis? But either way, yeah, it's his future. And it's nice to see Firouzja here, supported by his whole family. It feels like all the ingredients are here for him to have a successful tournament. We also see Wesley, who's had a consistent tournament, a bit up and down, but he'll be hoping to end up in the top 5 places, of course, in the Blitz to get that extra white in the classical section. Wesley, Mr. Consistent.
He's also Mr. Practical. I've noticed, when you provoke him, he comes out like a bear roaring. But until that moment, he's quite happy to do what is needed. And he's happy to conserve his energy. And there he has the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen.
Well, I think generally for the players, this Blitz tournament is about primarily to have white pieces in the classical to gain this opportunity, and only secondary question is that how it really works out at the final result.
And we see Alireza there smiling, getting in good spirits as he faces off against Fabiano Caruana. Seems very relaxed.
Yeah, very relaxed. And Caruana, meanwhile, the complete opposite, looks very focused. And he will, of course, be wanting to play the role of spoiler. Of course, also essential for him. He's around the middle of the pack, Fabiano, so a win would get him closer to the coveted top 5 spot. So we're about to have liftoff in this game. We see the handshake and quick move from Firouzja. Whoa, am I seeing this right? 1b4, the Polish opening. Okay, we see it all now. Orangutan.
Yeah.
Sorry, not the Polish. The orangutan opening. Wow, this does not have a great reputation. Magnus Carlsen lost with it just last week in Poland.
Maybe that's why he was smiling, that somebody was telling him, play 1b4.
But I remember Magnus doing this type of stuff as well. You know, he did it against Anish Giri. And we were like thinking, oh, what's he going to do? E4, D4? And like, no, B4. We're like, oh, ho, ho. Yeah. What do you think?
I'm skeptical. I don't know. This is the type of thing that can derail a tournament if you're coasting, if you're doing well. Keep with the same strategy. Don't just throw in random openings like this one. And Fabiano is the type of guy who will be well prepared and might well punish you. White does have an extra central pawn, but black has grabbed a B pawn. And look how active black's pieces are. Has anyone been brave enough to test this against you, Judith, in your career?
No, actually, I think never. In Blitz game, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but in classical, nobody. And, yeah, that was a funny start.
Funny start, and yeah, I don't know quite the quite the explanation behind this opening, but I remember Jovanka, after you mentioned Magnus played it last season on the Champions Chess Tour. I once went to a zoo with Magnus. He insisted on going to the orangutan section just to take a photo because he'd played the opening 1 week before. These top players, they have reasons for everything, but there's always method behind the madness.
And yeah, I just saw a nice message from chat saying the evaluation bar already angry, doesn't approve. I mean, I look at this position for white and I think, what is white doing? Because black has the center. White's moved around with the dark square bishop quite a few times, I have to say. And I would just be thinking about pushing that D pawn 1 square forward. And now it's in the air.
Yeah, but white can maybe get ambitious here and capture the black knight on f6 with his bishop, with his dark square bishop. I think you have to pretty much, Judith. Otherwise, black will step forward, as Jovanka mentions.
Well, maybe d4 is also possible, but then knight d4 can be very strong. This is the challenging question. Bishop f6, grabbing the d5, knight b4, rook c1. Because queen a1 was attacked.
Ooh, sneaky threat there.
Yeah.
And he will regain his pawn in the near future, Fabi, and with a very nice position. Firouzja here just trying to delay.
Well, the question is he going to take it back? Bishop b7, queen b3.
You're holding on for dear life.
I'm trying to hang on with my pawn on d5.
But it's one of those things that it reminds me of a situation like in those IQP positions where you give up a pawn and hold on to it, but as soon as black wins it back, your white's position just simply crumbles.
Yeah, the question here is whether Firouzja can give this pawn back under good circumstances. In the right scenario, he can maybe equalize. I would be racing to get the white king to safety, but he goes for Judith's plan here, just defending this pawn. Black will gang up against it, most likely now.
Well, rook a d8 is a very simple way of continuing.
Yeah.
That's what has been played.
Yeah, the problem is you can step forward to defend this pawn, but then you will get hit along the e-file. Rook to e8, and there will be massive problems for white. So Firouzja, wow, very ambitious play. D4. He's hoping to strike, maybe even regain a pawn if the D5 straggler is captured. Wow,
well, of course, if white would have castled already, it would be a completely different story, but there is still a very important tempo, which was not done by white to put the king into safety. At the same time, D4 I like very much because
I was wondering about this move and I was like, no, it's coffee house chess. You can't get away with it, but looks like you can.
Fabi's throwing another pawn on the fire. Here you have to take on b5. I think actually maybe there are options there. And Black's idea, sorry, is to take on d5. And things get crazy, but because White hasn't castled, tactics might work out in Black's favor. The alternative.
Maybe White can go d takes c5.
Yeah.
Take c4, grabbing the pawn, bishop d5. It's full compensation for Black. At the same time, White has a nice pawn on c5 there.
Yeah, and he spent a lot of time now, Firouzja, down, both players down around the 1:15 mark on the clock. He has to choose. You either take the b5 pawn with your bishop or take c5. They're totally different, of course, but they look roughly kind of similar in terms of evaluation. And, okay, what are they thinking about? Just take that bishop. This is going to get lively. You need your time for a bit later on.
No, maybe a5.
Wow.
c6.
This is so creative. Counter-attacking chess.
No, c6 is not good. B takes c4 and bishop a6.
Yeah.
Ooh, you have to take on b5 now. If you're Firouzja, what's he thinking about? Is he just going to drop back his bishop? White's bishop is attacked. No more counter-attacking. You have to react, have to retreat maybe. This is crazy, this position. It looks so random. White is 2 pawns up, but one of them is about to drop.
Yeah, I did wonder whether you could counterattack, but no, you're right. Not possible.
Firouzja's burning a lot of time, down to 35 seconds. He has to take this pawn, surely, or at least move his bishop. D5 will fall. Maybe you go back this way. Maybe this is the solid one just to defend your knight.
b5 must be the move.
Any move at this point. 20 seconds.
Yeah.
Good nerves.
Okay, he does drop the bishop to e2, but where is
a5 was a shocking. a5 was a shocking move for Firouzja.
Yeah, shocking in a good way. It just totally threw off Firouzja, and this pawn is dropping. Watch out for these 2 black pawns to maybe much down and decide things later.
I mean, can you not grab that pawn right now?
Yeah, I would with the knight.
Yeah.
Yeah, just grab it, take it. Maybe you can trade queens first. Maybe that's similar. Wow, even more ambitious. Queen g6 ignored. There's some threats against this pawn, but don't take it yet because White will play rook g1 and there's a counterattack against the
what
g7
about
pawn.
castle?
Ooh, it's Black's move though first, and
Queen
knight
g6.
White just played rook d1 last move, and it's given a question mark by the computer. There's this pawn, there's this check here on c2 hitting the white king. There's so many tempting moves.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I'm just so greedy. I would just capture the pawn on a2 and then push my pawns. Okay, and I can see that's what happened, but the evaluation bar says not the best decision.
Yep, he grabs a pawn now back, and is that white queen trapped? Not quite. She can find safety on d2. Fabi, it feels like maybe just a bit too slow there. If White gets one more move and castles, Firouzja should be safe. He needs something now.
And Fabi now down to 12 seconds, and big decision time, and that's why he steps forward with a bishop.
Right. Can't he grab on b2, g2? No, because rook g1, queen b2. Queen b2, what a good place for the queen.
And finally, better late than never, he's castled on move 23 as White. You normally want to do that a bit sooner, but still chaos. That black knight on c3.
c3 is extremely good.
Yeah, getting pieces off the board though. So if he can survive, he's still a pawn up.
And rook a2 winning material.
Ooh, some back rank tricks. Ooh, black playing h6 just to give the black king some breathing space.
Knight 8.
You can still do it.
Wow, maybe you take on e2 and the black queen is coming into d3. This one looks like Firouzja's blundered. He's lost control. The black queen zooms in. This one is going to be decided. It looks like there must be a checkmate. Another pin. Black's pieces all ganging up, and yeah, there we go. Material is dropping. Fabi.
Queen e3.
Oh, and it's all falling apart for Firouzja.
And he's just grabbing material now, cashing in. Black is up the exchange. Rook for knight, and White's king still not safe.
6 seconds versus 4.
And now rook a1 threatened. But just look at how Firouzja has picked up the pace.
Yeah, the fighting spirit is there.
Wow, fighting spirit. I mean, he showed that by playing 1b4, and he's about to be punished. Fabi has crept in. Hesitation, though. Counterattack, maybe? Black's queen. I don't know what he's done with it on h2.
F4.
Well, it's coming back in after h. And now queen will come to f5. And now maybe the rook will...
And rook c7.
Join the fun.
Okay, everything's defended now, but other than those pawns, and Fabi's cashing in, Just got to stop that white knight jumping too much, and the game should be won.
Knight d5, bishop queen e1.
And here we go. Fabi's got control now. He's just going to mop up.
Nothing can stop him. He could go also rook c7, exchange, simplify.
Yeah, good technique though. He's just kept everything covered, and wow, I thought he was going to grab some pawns, but still some work to be done.
Queen c3.
Oh, what is Fabi doing? I jinxed him. Commentator's curse.
The king can run to f8, so it's okay. But did you see the lightning speed of Firouzja as he...
Oh, some knight forks in the air. You've got to be really careful here.
Rook b3.
No, but you
knight f6, sorry. Because knight c5, queen c5.
Yeah.
Oh, he pins the white knight, but this is just delaying some pins. Black's king, queen, and rook are all lined up.
Wow.
Anything could happen here.
Queen c3. No, just a pawn.
Okay, no, but he's grabbed...
But this was not a good decision to take that pawn.
Fabi's coordinated again.
But look at the knight on e4, right? It's just controlling everything.
Knight's the king's best friend.
King goes all the way to g8.
What a crazy game. White's king is going to hide in the enemy camp, and it doesn't hide for long. That is checkmate.
And Firouzja is smiling.
He almost got away with it.
Went into the checkmate.
Absolutely. And, well, Alireza, he was the tournament leader, losing, which means that everything will now come down to Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, whether he can score something against Gukesh. And I'm looking, and it looks like Shakhriyar won.
Yeah, just as the moment you said that, Jovanka, Shakhriyar did take the win, and wow, takes the lead in the tournament again.
Yeah, and there we can see the playing hall. The players are ready. The spectators are watching in keen anticipation. And let's take a look at the round 8 scores. We see it was a draw between Wesley So and Magnus Carlsen. And Hikaru did beat Ariantari. Alireza Firouzja losing to Fabiano Caruana with the white pieces. And someone else who also lost, Anish Giri, to Nordibek Abdusatorov. So that's an important point for Nordibek, who now climbs up the standings. And Gukesh losing to Shakhriyar, which means that Shakhriyar is now tournament leader. And one round left. Woohoo! This has been absolutely scintillating stuff. And shall we take a look? Oh.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the action from the previous round. Of course, so many decisive games every round, and we want to bring as much action as possible to you. So it was this position between Anish Giri and Abdusatorov that things got really heated. Black has the bishop pair, Black is a pawn up, but Giri here spotted a tactic and went for it. Bishop takes g7, luring the Black king forward, and he was reliant on this skewer, hitting the Black queen and the bishop behind it. But this trick, queen c3, was able to save the day for Abdusatorov, keeping White rook honest, keeping an eye on this rook in the corner. And I think over the next few moves, Giri lost the plot. He wasn't able to find counterplay, and knight to d4 wasn't the right direction here. White's rook sliding, going for the Black king, but Black was safe enough. Bishop e7, a really nice move, reasserting control. The king was able to hide in the corner, and Black had an extra piece. Simply tactics that backfired for Anish Giri.
When it rains, it pours. Anish Giri suffering here in Norway Chess, opening Blitz. But still, everything to play for, because this is just a precursor to the main event, which will begin tomorrow. And let's take a look at the Blitz standings. And you have to remember, the players are playing for who gets the pick of the first seeding. So if someone chooses seed number 1, then they start off with 2 whites and they get 5 whites overall. And there we see in the lead Shakhriyar Mamedyarov with 5.5 points out of 8. He's closely followed by 2 players, Alireza Firouzja and Nordibek Abdusatorov, both on 5 points. Fabiano Caruana and Wesley So, both on 4.5 points out of 8. And Magnus, 4 points out of 8. I mean, how surprised are you to see Magnus Carlsen there in 6th place?
I'm a bit surprised, especially there he was winning up 3 games and he was very close to climb up to the top 3 or even to clinch the first place. But this is really not so important. It's not the life or death, right? And it's interesting to see the top that Nordibek, for example, he's up there really on the top. And, well, of course, still Magnus and Wesley So, I think they are still fighting for getting an extra white from tomorrow in the classical tournament.
Yeah, and this is such an important round for not just Magnus, who wants to win to get that extra white, but also Hikaru Nakamura. They are joint now in 6th and 7th place. If they win, they might get that extra white, but they really have to go all in this final round of the Blitz.
And let's take a look at the final round matchups and some big pairings in store for us all as the players all jostle for those important placings. And we see Magnus Carlsen will be playing against Alireza Firouzja. Shakhriyar Mamedjarov plays Hikaru Nakamura, Nordibek Abdusattorov, Gukesh, whereas Fabiano Caruana will face off against Anish Giri, and for Ariantari he will meet Wesley So. Oh, so which pairings catch your eyes?
For me, absolutely the top two. Magnus's game against Firouzja, that will be a hot game. And of course, Mamedjarov against Hikaru.
Yeah, there's so much at stake. Pride, tournament victory, those extra whites. It's all happening in those two top clashes. I think we'll be following those two very closely.
Absolutely. And do you think that Magnus and Hikaru, who both are in a must-win situation if they want to finish high up in the standings, do you think they can do it?
They can, but they might be facing opposition who will be happy to shut down the game. For example, Mamedjarov, he knows he'll clinch at least joint first with a draw in this final game. And also, Hikaru starting with black, it's going to be difficult for him against Mamedjarov if Mamedjarov isn't feeling up for a fight. That being said, it's Mamedjarov's style to go all out, so still some chances maybe to counterattack.
I would be surprised if Mamedjarov goes for a draw.
He's
That's
a
not
braver
his
man than me.
style, I think. It's, I mean, why to go for a draw? He does not have to force matters that it's really have to be a decisive game. But I think definitely he will try his best.
Yeah, I did hear some complaints from Mamedjarov himself when, he was told, you're getting older. Play like an old man, shut the game down. And he said, I can't do it. That's not chess for me. And I agree with you. I think we are going to see all action there. And there's pride at stake. I think it will hurt Magnus and hurt Hikaru to be finishing in the bottom half of the standings and playing with 4 blacks as a...
Especially that Nakamura started extremely stable and very well in this tournament.
Yeah.
So probably he's not going to have a very good mood after the event. But okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they will want to end on a high. They will start their classical games tomorrow, but you don't want that bitter taste in your mouth of losing your last game in the Blitz or having a terrible run at the end of it. It will dent your confidence, and especially with the Armageddon games in mind, it's a similar format, similar kind of speed needed. So they will want to get in that zone now.
And there we can see the playing hall as the players are going to enter the hall for the very last time today. And who's that? That's Ariantari. He's pacing. He's getting into that pre-game ritual. And there we see. Is that an arbiter in the corner?
Yeah, we have some arbiters there. We have a lot of fans in the auditorium. It's a really nice venue here in Stavanger at Norway Chess. And the players, one last time today, one last game. It's been so fast, I must admit, so furious. Just non-stop action from move 1.
There's been a lot of surprises. I do think that this round we're going to see some moving and shaking and some people playing the role of spoilers just for fun. And I have my eyes on Magnus and Hikaru. They say, you can finish at the top, but I'm going to bring you down a notch.
And wow, is this a first? Magnus Carlsen to arrive, to be the first to arrive in the playing hall? I've never ever seen that, I've got to admit.
Maybe he thinks that if he arrives first, he can leave first. He wants to get over with the event.
True.
I think Magnus, he will want those 5 whites.
Oh, and it turns out he was just putting his jacket on the chair.
And left.
And then he's gone again. Oh, wow. Keeps us guessing. The elusive Magnus Carlsen.
And someone who is seated at the board is Nordibek Abdusattorov, who's currently in joint second, and he will be playing against Gukesh, who has struggled in this event on this day.
Yeah, Norway Chess is one of his first huge kind of elite tournaments here at Gukesh. He hasn't had too much experience playing these big round robins with the very top guys in the world, so it might just take him a few days to find his feet.
He was here, I think, 2 years ago when he won the open section. And that's also partly he's invited, but of course he's a 2700 player, number 17 in the world. So,
yes. And I can remember in Tata Steel he played, and it was, again, a struggle for him, you know, especially at the beginning. But then he found his feet, as all youngsters tend to do, and he seemed to have gotten better and better as the event progressed. And there we see Magnus with the white pieces, adjusting his piece. Do you know what? I've never not seen a player not adjust their pieces.
Especially at the top level, they're very kind of
they're very
the attention to
particular.
detail.
It's a ritual. For the players.
But I can tell it makes for very strange viewing to someone who hasn't played chess before. And well, Magnus opening with the B3 cowboy. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, and Magnus did this at the World Rapid and Blitz Championship, and he had huge success with 1b3, scored almost entirely wins there with this opening, basically just emerging with a non-theoretical position, very quiet line here. It's basically a reverse London system. Whisper it quietly, but those London system fans will be very happy with the way that Firouzja has developed as black. And early pawn push aiming to punish b3. And okay, the queenside completely blocked up at this early stage. They're just freestyling now. It's all about who comes up with the better middle game plans.
It's one trend that I have noticed amongst the top players is that actually when they're playing with the white pieces, they're actually very content to play colours, an opening that you'd normally play as black. And they're just like, well, you know, I'm a tempo up. I'm just going to say there's a small, tiny advantage and just get you into my comfort zone as opposed to yours. And, well, Magnus making a typical pawn break in the centre.
Yeah, and usually black does not want to release the tension. If Firouzja does trade off a set of pawns in the centre, that only helps white. First, he posts up his knight on a very nice square on b4. And Magnus does the same in the centre.
Yeah, knight on e5, it's also very nice. And probably he prepares f4 for later.
Getting ambitious. It's really annoying for white that your queen is tied down defending this c2 pawn. You would love to activate her a bit later on. This black knight is going to be a real menace for the rest of the game.
Well, this is why it was important for black to play a5, forcing a4. This means that there's a good outpost for the knight on b4. And also white is not going to play c4.
First, the white king is kicked into the corner. And now Firouzja is lining up on d8. I've had some experience in this type of position myself, and I always favour black. It's just easier to move.
And
white,
after
you're a bit
rook
stuck.
d8 already, maybe d takes e4 is also something to consider and open up the d file.
Yeah, a rook staring down at a queen's always uncomfortable.
I do feel it's gone wrong for Magnus. I mean, and I would kind of point to that a2, a4 move way back, because my experience in those type of positions is that white tends to handle a5 by playing a3. So you don't have these pesky pieces sitting there on the b4 outpost.
Yeah, and meanwhile Magnus is contorting himself rook e2. I guess indirectly in some variations he might be protecting this vulnerable c2 pawn. But either way, mysterious stuff. And now if this central tension is released, Magnus will most likely capture back with pieces. It's very tense.
It's kind of a prophylactical move, I believe, that it's protecting the d2 knight, it's protecting the weakness on f2, potentially protecting the c2 pawn if once the knight will be able to move away. And also opens up the road for the queen later on to move it away to f1, g1 or something like that.
Yeah, first it feels like a waiting game for Firouzja, putting his queen on a6, a bit of a bizarre square, but maybe some tactics along this diagonal a bit later on. This might be the slowest 2 or 3 moves I've seen in a blitz game ever. Both players really struggling to come up with anything, and Magnus is the first to flinch, the first to blink here, and he releases the tension for the first time in the game. A pawn trade has happened. And okay, he's coming around with his knights. I like this.
I like it too, because I didn't like d takes e4 option for black. Maybe I would even suggest that it would be an interesting try immediately. Because now knight on e5 and potentially there's another place for the other knight on d4. b2 bishop is very powerful.
Yeah, white has the dream kind of fianchettoed bishops. Watch out for things opening up later. They'll favour those pieces. But still very much in the balance. I guess Black's idea is to try and challenge this knight. Maybe he's going to drop back this knight, but either way, White has two glorious pieces in the center, and Magnus going forward.
Against prophylactical move against knight f5. He wants to stabilize his knight on d4. Look at that. Knight b5 is not possible. Knight f5 is not possible.
Whoa, he's going forward immediately, Magnus Carlsen. I thought he would try to set up his queen and rook first before opening the position, but he's really storming forward, and he's utilizing the fact that this bishop might be undefended in certain variations if Black does open things up.
The question is, why is it so problematic for Black? Can Black capture the pawn?
Yeah, I would take it and just close my eyes and pray for the best here, because if you don't take this pawn, it looks like you're getting flattened, getting steamrolled.
Well, it's under attack for starters, and how do you defend it?
I don't see any other options.
You have to take the pawn on f5.
What has Magnus got up his sleeve there? Is he maybe going to push this pawn and win this one later on? It looks a bit clumsy for White, though.
Maybe he wants to take back on f5, and after knight f5, bishop h3.
Oh, wow. So pawn takes, and later lining up the bishop with some tricks on this diagonal.
Having the rook on g2, queen on g1, and put extreme pressure on the g5.
He's going to swing it across. Wow.
Are there also any tricks after pawn takes pawn to actually jump forward with the knight to d7 and look in that direction at the weak bishop?
Yeah, hitting the bishop.
I would think the rook can move to e8 and defend the bishop.
He's got to move, Firouzja. He's down to 20 seconds. They've just been playing too slow the last few moves, and wow, a really creative way to try and defend this pawn. Maybe indirectly.
Some knight f7 in the air. Sorry.
Ooh, yeah, I can feel your spidey senses, your tactical senses tingling here, Judith. Some tricks maybe on the square later.
The temptation is huge.
Yeah. First, just take this pawn. I don't really see what Black's got in mind. Black's structure is not great there anyway. Maybe also just bring the queen across. Just protect this one.
Yeah, after queen f1, maybe e takes f5 and bishop f6. Rook e1.
It's
the
getting
temptation
tactical.
is huge for several different moves.
Wow, such a slow pace. Only move 20, and both players now really low on the clock. Magnus just over 30 seconds. He needs to decide. I would just take this pawn and then start to figure out what to do with my pieces. But Magnus first kicks back the black knight. It feels like this helps Black, though.
Well, now he's going for that trade. And
is he going to capture now? That's the question. Is Magnus going to take the
e6 well, maybe? And rook e6, d3 is hanging.
That's the problem, right? And suddenly the queen on a6, which was locked out of the game, is back in there.
What nerves.
Wow,
14 seconds.
And now Magnus, less than 10 seconds on the clock. And the position is wild. And he is, in fact, going for those trades and does grab the e6 pawn.
And wow, Magnus, he has profited from this little transition. He is a pawn up, and he's blocked out the black queen. You think it's it? That's it, Judith? No way to fight back?
Well, queen on a6, bishop on h7. Some rook h6 will show up.
He's getting his queen back into the game for Firouzja here. He's going to try and fight. White still needs the knockout blow. A pawn up, but that's not the end of the game yet. Magnus, though, in charge.
And if there's one thing we've seen that Firouzja can play at lightning fast pace. And there we see a trade of rooks. And,
Magnus has given up his queen, but he's cashed in and he's broken through the black defenses. He's got a rook and a piece for the queen, but he's about to win a second piece. There's a deadly pin, and the black king could well just be getting checkmated. No defense here for Firouzja. He's trying to get in with his black queen. What is the killer blow? Wow, and he drops back his knight and some tricks here. Magnus gives up a rook, 3 pieces for the queen. This one's still anyone's game. The 3 pieces combining really well, though, at the moment.
They are combining very well, and the players are just like slamming down the clock. You know, you can feel the nerves. I have to say, you know, when it comes to queen versus 3 pieces, it's all about coordination and king safety.
And look at how fast they're playing. It's so easy to play with a queen, and Firouzja has one pawn back. There we go. All the pawns are disappearing. Oh, Magnus has put his pieces on really clumsy squares just to preserve his a-pawn.
Yeah, and the bishop is vulnerable.
I don't think he's going to win it. I think Firouzja's played so well, defended so resourcefully. And what are the white bishops doing? They've just left their king totally abandoned.
No, the king wants to go to the journey. A round trip.
This is risky.
Do you think that there's any chance that Magnus will actually lose this now that he's dropped?
Dropped his knight.
Oh my God!
This is what happens when you face a queen in Blitz chess. It's pretty much bullet chess at this point, and all the white pawns have dropped. The white knight has dropped.
Well, maybe he'll still save the game because the pair of bishop, a pawn, a6, a7.
It's a race.
Will be still enough for a draw.
We say that carefully.
Or?
He's
But
given
it
a
can be
check,
more
but it
also.
can be intercepted. And now the king, where to go? Step it back. Don't get in the pawn's way.
And the black queen can give some checks, but she cannot fight the bishops and pawn alone. Black's h-pawn just too slow. White's
4
bishop's covering
seconds.
everything. Oh, so nervous, both players dropping the pieces. Visibly shaking here. And we see eventually a repetition of moves, and it is, after all that drama, a draw.
Wow.
Roller coaster of a game. And oof,
We still have one more game running.
we certainly do. And, well, Fabiano Caruana and Anish Giri is still in play, but big news, though. Did you see that Hikaru Nakamura played the role of spoiler and beat Hikaru Nakamura?
So we will come to the standings later. Nakamura might well have got himself in the top 5 at the last minute, but this game has gone down to a king and pawn endgame between Caruana and Giri. Looks like it should be a draw, but you might have to be very, very careful if you're Caruana here. The black king is itching to get into the position. King and pawn endgames are so tricky, and Giri's coming around with the black king. Could this be deadly? Could he just shoulder off the white king and infiltrate? Oh, look at that. The evaluation bar does drop. Black is suddenly winning. The black king has come in. It's entering from behind, Judith.
Yeah,
Yep.
this is a good technique. The question is whether king e2, king f5 can... Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
And now the king goes back and grabs the pawn. Now it's over.
Wow. Okay, he's winning a pawn, Anish Giri, but is that the end of the game? He's been
Should
blocked
be
off.
f6.
Yep. But the problem is the black king cannot
Just
get
f6
around
and
now.
it's a Zugzwang.
Okay.
What's the problem? f6, you have to give up your opposition.
Yep. Looks like he's coming in, but not quite. I love what Fabi's doing. He's blocking off the white king. Really instructive stuff here.
Oh.
As soon as black pushes the f-pawn, everything will get traded down and white's king will just hide in the corner. This might be one of those rare exceptions. Being a pawn up is not sufficient to win.
And Fabi takes the opposition.
King f2.
Yep.
Yep. Just always drop back here, stare down the opposition king on the same color. There we go. Textbook stuff.
Uh-oh. King e3 now works.
Yep. King e1 might even work.
Yeah, that's what we played.
Yep. Just stay on the same color complex as the opponent's king. Just copy their maneuvers, essentially, to keep the opposition, as we call it. This is
No, but
pawn
when
endgame
king
101.
on d1, g4 was winning.
Did he put his king on d1?
Wasn't it on the d file?
Oh, wow. We might have just seen some drama. I think we did see some huge slips there, Judith. Just for 1 second, Anish Giri was winning, but now it should be back to being a draw.
I think it was on the d file, wasn't it?
And eventually a handshake. The player's laughing. Maybe missed opportunities for Anish Giri, but great defense from Fabiano.
Definitely great defense from the US number 2. And there we see the players analyzing.
They finished the tournament.
They have finished, but this was just a precursor. This was just a rehearsal. This was the the penny has dropped, and now they're talking probably about that king to d1. Yes, there was a moment where the white king came to d1 and black could have won by just simply pushing the g pawn. Oh, don't you hate it when your opponent points out those things? And let's take a look at the round 9 scores. It was a draw after a roller coaster game between Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Firouzja. And in other news, Hikaru Nakamura lost to Hikaru Nakamura. So this was a very important point for Hikaru. Perhaps he's moved into the top 5 in the standings. And for Nordibek Abdusattorov, it was a victory against Gukesh and a draw between Fabiano Caruana and Anish Giri, as was a draw between Ariantari and Wesley So. Ooh,
That was a fun afternoon.
It was very fun.
It was incredibly exhilarating. I mean, I want more. And we are going to get more.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow the main event starts and
look who won the event.
wow. From nowhere, like the submarine, it is Nordibek Abdusatorov who takes first place in the Blitz standings with an incredible 6 points out of 9. This means that Nordibek is given the first choice to pick his seedings. So if he picks number 1, he will start the tournament tomorrow with 2 whites. Alireza gets a second place and second pickings, and so it continues. And when it comes to the 5th place, because remember there are 5 people who will start with who will play with 5 whites and 4 blacks, well, that's tied, so that means it will have to go to the tie-break methods to decide who gets those all-important first choices.
Yeah, and we will await confirmation, but it's an all-American tie, an all-American pile-up on 5 points out of 9. Hikaru Nakamura, Fabiano Caruana, and Wesley So. One of them is going to miss out on that all-important white. But either way, congratulations to Abdusatorov. He's a man on form, winning the Chess Kid Cup last week and winning a Blitz tournament again now.
Yeah. Look at that. We were kind of not even noticing it that he just won, right? There was a focus on Nakamura in the beginning. Later on, it was the others. Firouzja came up, right?
Yeah.
And Mamedyarov was always there on the lead. Then Magnus tried to give some hint that he also wants to go up on the really top of the board. And then Abdusatorov.
Right. I mean, it's been a shocking turn of events because, I mean, if we look at the standings again, Hikaru definitely finished on 6th place. So he will have those 5 blacks and 4, well, assuming that the players all go for those 5 whites and 4 blacks. And when it comes to Magnus finishing in the bottom half of the standings. Who would have thought that?
Actually, I think he doesn't care so much about the colors. It matters about his form. And about that, he's much more worried if he is than about his colors. But of course, I'm pretty sure that he would favor white, right?
Yeah, I think any player at the top level would favour the white pieces if possible. But as you say, Magnus is going to worry about his form, but also those one-move blunders. They have plagued his game in rapid chess and blitz chess in recent times, and it happened a lot again today. Surprising stuff from the former world champion.
But do you think that this tournament will be a great way for, say, someone like Magnus to shake off the rust and get going now that those blunders have been made?
Yeah, normally you want to get a few games under your belt. You see the board a bit better. You feel a bit sharper, especially if it comes down to Armageddon. But yeah, either way, Magnus's confidence will be slightly dented, I have a feeling.
But I wonder how much he's up to play a classical game, how much his appetite is back for that, you know? Because after Vakanze, he said that he's kind of bored, right? It's kind of boring. He prefers to play shorter time controls. And now he's back, and I'm sure he wants to bite, especially after today.
Yeah, I don't think he's played a classical tournament since January, since Tata Steel. His last classical game was against me, actually, in March. And yeah, he didn't seem to be too kind of thrilled with the classical chess. But yeah, he'll have to get motoring tomorrow, as will all the players.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And let's remind ourselves of those all-important Blitz standings, because they will decide what players get how many colours, and also who will start off with a double white and who will start off with a double black. And if it all goes to seeding, we might see Hikaru actually begin with a double black.
Wow, if he starts the tournament that way, then he'll be up against it from game 1. But then again, if he survives the first 2 rounds, then he'll be full of confidence himself.
We'll see what happens, but let's remind ourselves of the standings. And oof, what a day. Surprises, shocks, roller coaster games. It's been brilliant.
It's also interesting to see, I think, that how emotionally players are going through even just 3 hours on these 9 games, right?
And here we can remind ourselves of the standard. and they've been adjusted for the tie breaks, and we can see at the top of the table, Nordebek Abdusattorov, he will get first choice. Alireza Firouzja will actually be the one getting second pickings, and Shakhriyar Mammadov gets third choice. And this is very important for Fabiano Caruana and Wesley So. They finished on 5 points, and they will get fourth and fifth choice. And Hikaru then gets sixth choice, so maybe he might not go for number 6. He might say, I'll leave that treat for someone else. And Magnus Carlsen is there in 7th place. So it's been an absolutely wonderful day of chess. So much excitement, so many surprises, and I think this is setting us up very nicely for what is going to happen when the main tournament begins tomorrow. And what do you guys expect from that?
Well, I'm expecting that the players will just recover of today's all kind of mistakes and problems and good moves and nice moments, and then tomorrow they come sharp and they kick off with some very interesting stuff. And I think this will be an extremely interesting event coming up with all the ups and downs, because the generational clash is also, and everybody's hungry, I think, and they want to win.
And there will be a winner, because it is Norway Chess where we have Armageddon.
Yeah, it really bodes well what we saw today. As you say, Jovanka, if the classical games are drawn, we head to Armageddon, and we saw the way the players were fighting in these games. We saw just taking risks. We saw them just kind of going all out for the win. And if that's reflected in the Armageddon chess, then we're in for a treat. So I can't wait to get started tomorrow.
Yes, and someone else who can't wait for the games to begin tomorrow, well, that's us here in the studio. And I'd like to thank everyone for watching. And it's been a day of fighting chess, and let the games continue tomorrow at 5 p.m. See you then.